I'm here, brother.
Can you hear me, brother?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
How
you
doing
today?
this beautiful morning, brother?
I'm excellent. I'm excellent, and I'm sitting here building with you. So that sets the tone, correct?
That sets the tone. Welcome back. Welcome back to High Frequency Radio. Man, I want to thank you for coming back. Like I said, I was just telling our listening audience, I went back and I always do my due diligence when I have guests on the show, and I had to go back and actually re-listen to the show you did prior, and personally, I don't think I did a very good job on that interview because you were dropping. I think I couldn't. Probably because I couldn't. I said, "Man, I don't know what to ask this brother and everything." But I had to really go back and listen to you and the things that you were explaining about soul and spirit. And man, it is some of the way that was so eloquently put down and laid down, brother. I really have to compliment you on that.
Oh,
you really have. I really, really, truly believe that you have gone through some sort of initiation, and like you said in the earlier show, it wasn't quick, it wasn't easy.
No,
you went through it. But go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about yourself and give them some background information too.
Okay, sure. Well, the first thing I want to say. Certainly, with the piece that we did, well, the two pieces, because I think we hit twice. The two hits that we did before, it was certainly a process of symbiosis, because I wouldn't have been able to bring forth the information that I did if not for the way your energy was. So sometimes, when brothers get together, it's not even about what we're saying. It's just about the vibration that we can share, which raises each other up. So I'm thankful.
That's true.
And I'm equally, if not more, excited to participate in this time. Because it's very rare that real men get an opportunity to build with each other. So I'm always excited for that. But a little bit about myself. I'm just a student. Just like everyone who's here listening. I'm a student just like you. The only difference is maybe because of my experiences and the type of teachers that I came from underneath, I may be a little bit further down the road than most. I'm a little bit more advanced, but I'm on the same road that you're on, trying to make things right, trying to get back to where things should be. I've been a practicing spiritualist and cultural curator, custodian, for about 23, 24 years, something like that, and a lot of my work began just with community work, that my first expressions and contribution back to my community actually started in detention centers. I started in women's detention centers, just doing speaks, workshops on culture, empowerment, social etiquette. I ran programs for young men as well. And all the while I was doing that, I was doing some heavy spiritual study and even initiations in various systems. But what I chose to do at that time was to keep that side of me in the dark and to keep it kind of secret until I felt my spiritual life had truly rooted and I was ready to expose it to other people. So initially, when I first started working and doing spiritual work, most people just knew me as a community worker, as someone who was always running programs, or that's the Kwanzaa guy, the ones putting on Kwanzaa this year, things like that. But on the back end, all of my insight, direction, strength, and fortitude was coming from dealing with these African occult systems. So it was some time ago, close to a decade, where I made a decision to start merging those two worlds together. And one of my chief pivots in terms of my spiritual understanding is the West African Yoruba system. And it's not to say that I hold that one higher than any other one. It's just that was the one that was most intuitive for me. But I came through many other.
That was going to be my next question. Well, what led you to that? And I like that answer. That was the one that was most intuitive.
Yeah.
Great.
That one worked for me because I was dealing with the Nation of Islam. I dealt with the Christian church, dealt with the Nation of Gods and Earth, Buddhism, Hinduism, pretty much all the isms. I went through a bunch of isms. And they were all great. They were all excellent stepping stones. And there are times that I even return to those systems now to help teach my students in a way that is effective. But when I came into the Yoruba construct, the questions that I had, which were mainly revolving around self-actualization, because that was my whole thing with all the systems. How do we get back to being us? All of these great things I keep reading about in our legacy and all of the wonderful works that we did. I'm not interested in worshiping all these gods that you keep putting in front of me. So how do I get to a place where I can be Imhotep? Where I can manifest that energy. And when I came into the Yoruba construct, just by divine coincidence, the instructors that I had, they were willing to have that conversation with me. When they started putting other quote unquote gods and archetypes in front of me, and I was like, that's cool, man, but what about self-actualization? And I was fortunate to have some very, very seasoned elders. I mean, these cats were in the 90s, and they started to speak to me in terms of the Yoruba perspective on what that means. And it made so much sense for the nutrition that I needed at that time and for what I felt my people needed at that time. So that's kind of how I came into the Yoruba systems. And because I had this amalgamation of all this information from these other systems, what I also did was, as I was teaching and taking on students, people, were finding out more. I wouldn't just teach the Yoruba just because I was initiated in that. I was initiated in other systems too. But I said, you know what? I need to draw up the best parts of all of these systems and present them in a way so that it's effective and relevant to my people. And that's how the Anu system, the Anu order, which I now work out of, that's how that came to be.
So this is basically a synthesis of all the different schools of thought or disciplines that you've studied, and you've kind of put it in one, kind of like how Bruce Lee did, I guess, with his style.
Yes, sir.
And you know what? That's great, because I feel like a teacher, my feelings on a good teacher is someone, and you can tell when somebody understands some information, when you're able to do something like that, when you're able to synthesize information and form a bridge for your students so they can walk over, so they can see the connectiveness, the uniformity. Because a lot of people, especially religious-minded or dogmatic individuals, they seem to have a type of a separate mind. They're like, well, if you don't have the belief system I have, you're going to hell.
Right. Right.
If you don't believe the way that I believe. And I tend to look at things, when I look at different religions, I look at the similarities between things. Mm-hmm. That's how I think. I'm constantly looking for, look how this is just like this. Look how Buddha just said the same thing Jesus said. Do you see how he just said the same thing? But some people can't see that. They'll say, well, he didn't say the same thing, and they don't see that he just said the same thing.
Right.
That's, so what are your feelings on that?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, man. It's interesting because I guess I have a love-hate relationship with the energy that those type of individuals project. Number one, I'm a loyalist. So I do admire loyalty when it is true loyalty. Now, blind faith and ignorance tears a hole through my community. So, I'm not really too endeared with that level of ignorance. But, what's important, I think, is that those people hold the vanguard and hold the gate for those different systems. And a lot of times for us, special individuals to rise up, we have to use their shoulders as stair steps. We have to use what they're giving us. There has to be somebody that holds the guard. And that may be an ascension point for them, because who knows where they were before. I have a close friend that I was speaking about recently who he's a deacon in the church, and he goes to church. He was bragging to me. He was like, man, I'm in church like 4 or 5 times a week. And I told him, I said, because you need to be in church 4 or 5 times a week, because you're crazy. He used to rob armored cars. That was his thing, So I was like, I said, you got to be in there, because you still leaning. And they just made him an elder. So now he's an elder, and He was like, yeah, man, because he can talk to me in a way that he can't talk to the people in his congregation. And he was like, man, sometimes at night that drug be calling me. I'll be wanting to go out and get a balloon, get a bag of some dope, or sometimes I want to go get my pistol and see if I still got it. So he still
right.
needs that civilizing aspect and the rigid rules of the church just to get him civilized, because he's still trying to live like a savage. So there is a point of necessity, I feel, that some of these hard form religions have. And once they get you to the point where you're civilized and now we can have a civilized discussion, then we can move beyond them. So, I mean, for me, it's kind of like a love-hate thing. But you're absolutely right in terms of congruencies. It's one of the main things that I teach. And what you'll find is that when you get into any serious discipline, that they all pivot around the same points. I mean, you could listen to Bruce Lee and you can ascend your soul just by listening to some of the things he used to say, just by watching him fight. Bruce Lee.
And he has a lot of Zen background.
Right. The Zen, and just, when you constantly getting punched in the face and you punching somebody else in the face, you learn some critical truths about life. If anyone who's ever really practiced a martial science, that there's those days when you go into the dojo or you go into the gym, and maybe you might have went in and you had a head cold or something, and somebody kicks you on the side of the head, and it makes you question so much in your life. Just that one hit, and you'll be like, man, do I really want to do this? Why am I here? Why did I get out of bed today? What is the point of this? And it causes you to ask yourself critical questions. So, and there's many other arts that will do the same thing. I mean, there's a person who can get that off of just, cooking, making some food. So when we get back to our primordial understandings and our primal arts, you'll find, just like you said, at the primary foundations, all truths are saying the same thing. The only things that differentiate the different systems from one another are the parts that's fake. The lies are what differentiate them. You go to any system, let's say even in fighting, a punch is a punch. And they're all the same. I don't care if you go all around the world, a punch, you're going to ball up your fist pretty much around the same way. And if somebody tells you to do something that's just crazy and it doesn't work, that's the lie part. So it's the same thing with the religions. The part that is so usually far off from one another, that's the part that somebody infused in it. So I'm totally with you on that one.
Right. I like that. But hey, I don't want to take you too far off point today, because we kind of talked a little bit before the show. Today you wanted to get into some discussion on, I believe, community development and how you can use these systems to be implemented to benefit and improve the community. So what's your outline, what's your plan on that? Because I'm kind of interested in that, how you plan on doing that.
Sure. Okay, well, first, there has to be an objective to create community. A lot of times we speak about community development, but then there also has to be that, it's kind of like that cognitive dissonance when we sit back and you really have to say, well, do we truly have a community? Or are we speaking parathenically? As far as my perception, there currently is no community for those of us who consider ourselves to have elevated awareness. We haven't even built it yet. We speak about it, and there's probably a spirit of it because we speak about it so much. But considering the fact that there's been a melanin dominant metaphysical movement in this country since the 1920s, we going back to the days of Father Divine and those cats who were bringing metaphysics to our community, and there were people even before that, but by now we should at least own a town or a block or a building even, so without those keys and those components of self-sustenance and self-sustaining, it's very difficult for us to say that we have a community. And I don't say that to, again, just put a downtrodden perspective and say, oh, we ain't got nothing. I say that to say so that we can take a real honest, objective look at where we're at and then make moves from there. And also as a precursor to what I'm getting ready to say, so it makes sense, the perspective I'm coming from. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he gave us a three-part, what we'll say, term and phraseology that was very valuable, and it was food, clothing, and shelter. You know, he spoke about food, clothing, and shelter, and they're really basic tenets that if we could learn to kind of get back to, one of the things that we'd be able to find, like you were speaking about earlier, which was, you know, right on the rhythm of where we're at, is we'd be able to find those congruent points where we do meet and say, yeah, we all do need this. We all do need food, clothing, and shelter, regardless of the status that we claim, regardless of who we pray to, or if we pray to or don't pray. It's clear that in this dimension and in this reality, food, clothing, and shelters was needed. And of course, because I'm coming from a spiritual perspective, I'm not only speaking about third dimensional physical food, clothing, and shelter, but I'm speaking about it from an esoteric sense as well. You know, how we obtain food, clothing, and shelter and what we claim to be as our root culture are the defining points and aspects of what we call our community. And being able to have those tenets that we pivot on, that internal doctrine, and that's what creates us. And for that, we don't necessarily even need leaders. We just need some common working definitions. But I really, on this segment with you, Brother Yusef, I wanted to just focus more on food, you know, because I think each one is a gigantic initiative at this point, and each one is a show unto them itself, you know. So I would start with food, and what I wanted to share at first is my understanding or understanding of what food is in this time, and in some senses how food has maybe strayed us away a little bit. I'll start with an understanding of, because I got to go to the spiritual first, and I was speaking about, so I'm currently on a tour right now around the U.S., and I'm in Arizona. I'm in Phoenix right now. And some thoughts had come to mind, of course, coming through the desert, you know. And I was thinking about in the Bible when Ezekiel had to go preach to the valley of the dry bones, you know. And I thought about the resurrection work that we do. You know, when I say we, I mean people like me and people like you who are constantly, like you said, I'm putting things on Facebook. I'm trying to wake you guys up. I'm showing you what's going on. And I'm constantly trying to put the message in front of you and giving you an opportunity to grab on and do something, you know. And I thought about the art of necromancy, you know, or even raising the dead. There you go. And there's an excellent book, The Necronomicon, which I've suggested to students before to check out. And more so checking out the Necronomicon so you can understand several things. One, the workings of your subconscious mind, and the workings of Western occult subconscious mind. Okay, and even Western occult media, because most of the movies that you watch are based on, especially the scary ones, are based on the Necronomicon. You know, but the act of raising the dead, I think, is something that we need to really look at, real importantly, because we speak about the ancestors a lot. I mean, it's very rare that we even have an event where we're not giving libations to our ancestors, which is an excellent practice. We do that all over the continent. That's wonderful. But one of the things that I focus on and I teach in the Anu order is not just African rituals and clothes and music and things like that, but more so, what's more important to me is African calculation. You know, how do we think as Africans? How do we calculate as Africans? Moving beyond African philosophy. Philosophizing is cool, you know, when you're sitting around doing nothing and maybe you smoking a J or something and you just want to philosophize. That's cool. Right. But when you want to actually start building, you got to calculate. You know, so in African calculation, and I'll take it back to the Yoruba, which I said, of course, is my pivot. In African calculation, when you're dealing with the Yoruba, you have this word Ohun, which is spelled O-H-U-N, Ohun. And Hun, very interesting, when you're dealing with the Hindi systems, Hun is the sound of the earth awakening unto itself. So Hun
is that similar to Is that similar to Om?
Yes, it is similar to Om. Om is considered like one of the highest vibrations. But Hum actually comes, you could say in a sense, Hum comes right after Om. Look at Om as the mother and Hum as the child taking its first breath.
Okay.
You know, so it's like, I'm aware, I'm here, you know. And if you notice, and I'm sure it's going to happen in the course of us speaking in this conversation, a lot of times when people say things that we dig and we connect with, one of the first things we do is go, you know, we do it instinctually. We say all the time. We say or that's deep, you know.
Right.
You know, so everything is everything.
Right.
Everything connects. But in Yoruba we have Ohun, and Ohun means the owner or the spirit of awakening. One, it's got 3 definitions. It also means to listen, and it also means a force. Now, in the Yoruba construct, at least as far as the ancient vernacular, this is the closest word that we have to the English word thing. Because in Yoruba, there is no word for a thing. Things don't even exist. Everything is a force. So even if you're speaking about the chair you're sitting in, it's considered to be a force. It's not a thing. Okay? So even things that are inanimate, or I should say things that are inorganic, are still animated. Everything is alive. Everything has chi, prana, ashe, life force that can be used for something. Right? So, in this construct, in this thought and reality, essentially, nothing dies. It just transmutates. Now, when you're dealing with necromancy, you know, and I'll say as a side note, this is why it's so critically important when you start getting into an understanding of something, or you start really getting into a learning and a knowing, to understand its cultural roots. You know, it's not always good to take things outside of their cultural context, because when you take them outside of their cultural context, then you don't really understand maybe what its original intent and agenda was about. You know, so
yes,
you know,
good point.
So when we deal with necromancy, the word itself is broken up into 2 words. Necro, which is Nekro, where we get the word Negro, and necro means a dead body, a dead human body. That's necro. Okay, and mancy comes from mancia, and we're speaking Latin now. We're in the Latin. So mancia means to prophesy or to divine. So necromancy is divining or communicating with the dead. Divining or communicating with the dead. That's necromancy. So now, what's critical is for those of us who practice it or get into it, or we immediately assimilate it with an African's intention to connect with their Egun or their ancestors. In Yoruba, we call them Egun, or our ancestors. The problem that comes into place here now is that when you're dealing with necromancy and that level of occultism, or that understanding of occultism, you're raising something that died. When you're dealing with Egungun or ancestral work from the African mindset, you're communicating with something that's still living, that has released its physical form. Okay? So, and this is all related to food. I know people probably like, how does this?
Yeah, I'm really interested in see how this ties into food.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm waiting on that.
Okay. So now we have to look at for a moment and we're going to pull from different traditions to kind of understand this. We got to look at the process of necromancy. And in older times, in Europe, the process of divining with the dead was not a 1-2 quick thing. It's not like how when I do readings and I just light a candle, light my cigar up, and throw out my divination tools or throw some bones, and now I'm talking. Their process took months and months of rituals and sacrifice, and human sacrifice and blood, animal sacrifice, music, different forms, sex on top of altars. A lot of times they would even eat the corpse of who it was that they were trying to communicate with. They would do this over a series of months just to have one conversation. Okay? So one thing you get in mind is that it takes a lot of energy to raise the dead, to resurrect the dead, to get the dead to stand back up. It takes a lot of.
Tell me.
I think
Don't I know?
you're getting a clue of where we're going with this. I know you know because we spoke about this.
Right.
I know you know. So,
yeah.
Resurrect, and just to be clear, so everyone's clear on our common working definitions. Surrect means to rise. Surrect means to rise, and re or ra means light, or some people's understanding is God. Re is God. Okay, so to resurrect somebody is to raise them back to God. Raise them back to God. That's one of the reasons why those of us who do these type of blog talk shows and go out and do community work and travel all over the U.S. dealing with people, part of our work is to reconnect people with their traditions and their understandings and their relationships with the Most High. That is a form of resurrection. Okay, but now I'm going to take you to John 3:16. I'm going to take you to the Bible. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whomsoever shall believe on him shall not perish but have everlasting life. Okay, cool. So now what this basically means, because we're speaking about mythology, the mythology of this that gives us an example is that in order to save a dead or dying world, you have to go kill yourself. Because that's essentially what the Christ did. So you have to now start making some decisions based on your desire to raise things that are dead, that are no longer living. You have to understand that first you're going to have to completely sacrifice yourself in order to raise things that are dead back to God, number one. And that, for those listening, that gives you an opportunity to decide if that's a sacrifice you want to make. Now, we're bringing it back to the understanding of necromancy in a social construct, of course, because in a social construct, or even in a physical or biological construct, if we're trying to raise something that's dead to bring it back to life, obviously it takes an enormous amount of energy. Now let's take it to a biological construct. Okay, for me, I know when I eat something like potato chips, it puts me to sleep. Like if I eat 5 or 6 potato chips, I go to sleep because
I was going to say, to me, I'm going to let you answer, but to me, when something does that, that's why I stopped eating meat. Mm-hmm. The last time I ate some meat was some fish, and I had been on a vegetarian diet for a long time. I ate it. It put me to sleep. I felt like it was trying to kill me. And I said, right. That's what I felt. I said, look, that's not for me. But go ahead.
Right. No. That you hitting a good point. Matter of fact, and I want you to keep that point at the forefront. Because when we look around to something, you're going to see that's what Brother Yusef just said. For those who are listening, please, if you're writing notes, write that down or just think about it. He said he ate some fish and it felt like it was trying to kill him, and he said that's not for me. That's key. Okay, so when we look at it from biological sense, again, like I said, for me, potato chips. Okay. Because what happens is once I put them inside the body has to figure out what the heck it is, because it's been fried to the point that it's not a potato chip anymore anyway. So the first thing the body has to do is take the oil and separate it from the actual potato. Okay, so that's one part of the process. It's got oil, water, and the potato. That's all a potato chip really is. So it's got to separate them. That's one process. Then it has to rehydrate this dried piece of potato. So now in the process of rehydrating this potato is taking moisture out of my bones and out of my skin, because that's what it's going to go to first. So now my mouth is dry. I'm eating these potato chips because the body is saying I have to put water back into it to make it a food again. And then after all of that said and done, the body realizes this white potato is not even native to your system. There's not much I can do with this, but I'll try. And I still got all this leftover oil. Well, I'll just dump that in the intestines. We'll leave that there. So my point is, it takes an enormous amount of energy and effort for the body to take something that was once dead. This is one of the avocations for people who decide I want to eat a live food diet, because it's easier to digest and I'm putting something that's alive. The body doesn't have to go through the process of resurrecting it. Okay, so it processes much easily, and instead of making us sleepy or tired, it gives us energy like it's supposed to. Now,
that's right.
Let's take that and we're gonna transcribe that over to our relationships that we have with people and the circle that we keep around us. The people who are around us, of course, they're always speaking. They're using their own breath and their air to whisper into the winds, and that goes into our air, and that becomes a part of our food. That becomes a part of our eating patterns. What we ingest is not just what we put in our mouths to eat, but it's also what we put in our ears to digest by the womb of our minds. Okay, so if we're putting dead information into our minds have to go through a process of making sense out of a lot of times what is insane. We got to make sense out of nonsense. This is one of the reasons why a lot of people leave organized religions or religions that are based off of a high level of fairy tale, because it's nonsensical. It's not relevant. It doesn't apply to anything. It's not relatable. And now I got to
don't make no sense.
Makes no sense.
And it make any sense, and it just amazes me. People try to make it make sense. You know, like, okay, some people say that Jesus is God. Okay, if Jesus is God, how is he the Son of God? If Jesus is the Creator, why is he on the cross asking the Creator, why have you left me? You know, it just things like that. And, you know, it's like, okay, well, you know, if Adam and Eve were the first two people on the planet, who the hell did Cain take as his wife?
Right.
You know, it just simple, basic questions, and people will try to explain it away. And
right.
And you have to, and you get to a point, you're like, well, okay, I see this person right here is not using right reasoning, you know, and sometimes it was kind of way they're trying to, you know, there's a blockage there or something. That's just my view on it. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
No. You're absolutely right, brother. You're right into it, because a lot of the questions that you brought up, they kind of lead us around into circles. Now, of course, can we understand what's being said here? Yeah, of course. There was nothing that said that Adam and Eve were the first created on the planet. So we already know that there were people here. When the Elohim said, "Let us make man in our image, male and female," they created them. The Elohim means gods and goddesses. So there were people present. But ultimately, so what? At the end of the day, you know. Now, does that help?
Not relevant.
It's not. How do I figure out how to work an HVAC system? Because we want to get independent. We want to get our land and everything. Does anybody know how to work the AC systems? You know, or you know, the heating and the cooling. Can I build a doghouse? Because, you know, I used to run a program where I taught young people how to renovate and rebuild homes. I did that for some years, and one of the things, the exercises that we would always start them off with was building a doghouse. Because if you can build a doghouse basically in structure and design, it's the same thing as a house that you would live in. It's the same principles that go, same angles and everything. And, you know, because this program was an ATI program, which means alternative to incarceration, you know, I had a lot of bangers in my program, you know, so they shooting guns all crazy, got misspelled tattoos up and down their arms, you know, so they been living all this life, got all these children, but couldn't put a doghouse together. So, you know, in the same instance, when we're sitting here and we're debating, we're trying to figure out the tenets of all of this junk food, you know, it really leads us away from the good nutrition that would actually fortify our systems and our bodies. Okay, so for instance, it's like that savage Western phrase, this is like beating a dead horse, right? So that's a form of or an attempt of necromancy. So when we're sitting here arguing or debating, however we want to call it, over principles and ideas that have already been proved maybe 50 years ago that don't even work for us, but we still want to sit here and debate over them, then that within itself is necromancy. Okay, that within itself is ingesting the wrong foods. Okay, because you're trying to get life out of something that no longer has life. Maybe it had life at a point. It goes back to what we were saying in the beginning. Yes, some people are hard, strict coded into their religion, and there was a time when we all needed that as a people. Just like there was a time when our parents told us the best thing we could possibly do was get a city job. Because if you get a city job, you can never get fired. You got good benefits. You get your pension early, and you got a bunch of days off. So that was like the pinnacle of achievement. And then we started working with some new definitions of achievement. Then it was the corporate thing, get a corporate job. Even if they put you in the mailroom, it's okay, because who knows, in 20, 30 years, you might have a desk of your own, with a name tag on it. And then we did that, and we figured out that doesn't work. Enron scandals and things like that, but it just doesn't work. We were all miserable. So our working definitions change. And if we keep trying to use old models and old definitions of what success is or what food is, then we're trying to raise something that's dead. It's like us trying to do revolutionary work and we still want to eat hog. And we're saying, well, Nat Turner ate the hog and look at what he did. Yeah, but that was for a time dispensation. And he might have did it better if he wasn't on the hog. Who knows? But now that we have we have new, more living, more alive information, and we're in a new paradigm, then we should act accordingly. I'm going back to your fish now. It's like you said, I ate this fish and I knew it wasn't for me. It felt like it was trying, like it was trying to take my life out. I knew it wasn't for me, so I put it down. Okay, now, I could bring you 20 to 30 books that tell you fish is good for you, though. And
right. I mean, I even know that it is called a brain food. I know there's things in it that work on the neurotransmitters of the brain.
Right. There we go.
I'm in agreement with you.
Yeah, but I'm not saying it's good for you. I didn't say that.
Right.
I said I could bring you 20 to 30 books that tell you it's good for you.
Right.
And it may take you a month or two to get through all these volumes. But essentially what you're doing, you've already figured out that the paradigm of Yusef L. eating fish is a dead paradigm. So now I'll bring you 20 to 30 books so you can now learn to practice necromancy and bring that reality back to life. Try to resurrect that reality within yourself. And you said something key. I felt like when I was eating this fish, it was trying to kill me. Okay, well, trying to make that a part of your reality, you're going to have to sacrifice yourself like the Christ did. You're going to have to kill yourself to now be able to say, hey, fish is for me. Because Yusef L. already figured out that the information here, the data, the code that fish has in it does not work for my light code matrix. That matrix may work for somebody else, but that matrix doesn't work for me. So I'm going to leave that alone, because at this point, even if I read a bunch of books on it, that would be what we call dead intelligence. You're giving me a bunch of information and data. Yeah, brother, Yuya brought me these 30 books to read on fish, but it's not relevant. It's dead information. Now, I got to try to make this dead information real. I'll give you a small example. I did a lecture recently in Austin, Texas. And I spoke about soulless individual or the created individual. And a lot of people, well, several people of different groups had a question. And they kept saying, well, how do we know when someone doesn't have a soul? How can you tell if someone doesn't have a soul?
Yeah.
And
you gave an excellent explanation of that, but go ahead.
So, I don't even remember what I said last time, but I know what I said recently. Because sometimes when you're working with this type of information, a lot of times it just flows through, and sometimes people come back and say, hey, remember what you told me last year? Nah, I don't remember. Not really. Because of the way it flows. But maybe it's the same thing I said before. But I had told them, well, one of the first things you'll find that if you're speaking to someone who doesn't have a soul, let's say if there's three people that you're talking to, and at the time, I think there were three people standing in front of me. And I said, and these were three women, actually. And I said, right now, because I'm a man, I feel an immediate magnetism coming from you. We want each other. Not want each other in a sexual sense or anything like that, but from an energetic sense. Because I'm electric and you're magnetic, there's a little pull. And that even occurs with, you might have a conversation with a woman that you can't stand. But if she has a soul and she's vibrating with that magnetic energy, there's going to be a little, you can feel it. You can feel like a little pull where, okay, this person is real. I can sit and have a conversation with them, or I can sit and have an argument with them, whatever it is. But this is a real being. I said, now, the three people in front of me, one, and this is just a simple way, and I said one simple way I can always tell is because the person who doesn't have a soul, number one, I will feel no pull towards at all. And number two, it will be a strain to communicate with them because it's kind of like they're just not there. I'll see two or feel two people there, and then it's just like this empty space right there. Even though my physical eyes see somebody standing there, it just feels empty, like there's nothing there. So I said, now what will happen is if I want to force the issue and make this person real and continue to have a conversation with them, I'll start giving bits of my own ashe or my own energy to the individual to make them realize in this third dimensional reality, to bring them to life, to bring them to fruition. Now they're soulless, but because I have a soul, because I have the breath of life, because I am Olodumare, because I am God, I can make them real. I can transform them into a soulless spirit, into something that's real on a three-dimensional reality. But of course, that takes a lot of energy because I'm raising the dead. It takes a lot of energy to raise the dead. So, that was one of the quick ways. And when I said that, it was interesting because one of the people there didn't have a soul. And one of the women there, she felt it immediately. And later she came back to me and she said, I know exactly what you were saying. She said there was somebody standing there and I couldn't really make them out. It was like an unfocused picture. They weren't really there, but I wanted them to be there because I physically saw them there, So this takes you back again to the understanding of the food. In so many senses, Brother Yusef, we've lost our spiritual connection with the consciousness of the food that we eat. We look at food, like one of the things you just said was key. Like you did some study, obviously, and you saw, well, hey, fish is a brain food. This is some good stuff. I'm supposed to eat this. But sometimes we get off because we look at our physical body like it's a machine. And it's not just that we just look at it like that. You look at advertisements and everyone tells you the human body is a miraculous machine and this, that, and we're so much more than a machine. We're sacred. We're divine. We weren't just created. I know we have this understanding and this thought that many of us living here in North America have been bred for the purposes of chattel slavery. So, we got this mindset of just being machines. So a machine, when you need gas for your car, you want to put a good grade in it, but you'll put whatever in it as long as it keeps it going. Because you don't really have a spiritual connection with that car, and you don't have a spiritual connection with the fuel that you're going to put in the car. You just know that the fuel will keep it going. So in the same instance, you developed a spiritual connection with that fish, because as soon as you ate it, you said, no, this isn't for me. Because maybe the consciousness of that fish doesn't align with with your consciousness. It's more than just the fish being fuel. It's more than just our food being fuel. So now I'm going to take you back to the example that I gave you with bringing you 20 to 30 books. That would represent fuel. Well, here's some stuff. If you put this information inside your brain, you're going to have more information. But for what purpose? What part of my consciousness am I fueling with this? Am I even fueling my consciousness with this information? Or are you just giving me 30 books to fuel my ego? To say, oh, I know this. I know more stuff now. I have more of an accumulation of mental wealth. But I may not have even brought into something that's good for my consciousness. Like you might have said, well, hey, the fish was no good for me. So let me start studying about groups around the world, or maybe on a continent, that don't eat fish and why they don't eat it. Maybe there's something deep here. Maybe there's a spiritual reason why at one point I used to be able to eat fish and now I can't eat fish anymore. Maybe my body is going through something. Maybe I'm transcending. Maybe I'm a part of the Poseidon or the Neptune cult and I never knew it. Maybe I'm a deep underwater energy.
If I could comment on that, sure. It was a change and like an awakening. I just believe, this is just my personal belief, that we weren't meant to eat animals. Mm-hmm. Just something in me just said, you're not supposed to be eating other animals. And it was just, when I looked at myself in the mirror, my hair was gone. Mm-hmm. I had little dark rings under my eyes. I was overweight, and I began to notice that I said, I've been punishing my body. I've not been giving my body real food. Mm-hmm. I grew up in the hood. We had all the fast food restaurants, Church's Chicken, Jack in the Box, McDonald's, fried food, all this, this what this called soul food type diet that you grew up on, lots of tater chips, lots of sodas, all these things in my lifetime. When I went back and I started thinking, and I said, man, became angry because I was like, why wasn't I informed on how to properly take care of my temple? And I've just been polluting my temple. Now I'm engaged in a process. I actually did a 21-day water fast, which I think gives you spiritual power. Yeah. I do. I think water gives you spiritual power. I mean, I think your thoughts increase. I think you manifest things faster when you stop ingesting food and just take on water and start getting all of the waste out of the body. I think that waste out of the body forms some sort of blockage spiritually and mentally. And I see all this stuff coming out of my body, and even in 21 days, I was not complete, detoxing the body. It was still in its process, Right. Matter of fact, I believe it just started. Right. Cleaning. So, it just really, I really become to realize like how I punished myself, and that the consciousness, the awareness part of it is that, man, I have a power. And I got to tune into that power, and there's some physical things that I'm going to have to do. It's really like a mental process because the mental controls the physical. But I have to get this temple cleaned out. And when I ate that fish, because I kind of backslid, I was cleaning myself, and I said, man, I'm going to just try to eat some fish. I ate that fish. I didn't wake up till the next day. Right. I went to sleep, and it made me so tired. I knew it innervated my body so bad, I just knew that it wasn't for me. Right. Right. Because you were reaching back down into the dead pool. See, when you were drinking all of that water, you rose up. You became more alive. Okay, so now that you're vibrating at that live level, I'm sure if you would have threw a mango in your mouth or some cherries or something, wouldn't have did that. Right, you would have been cool because we're vibrating up here with the food of the gods now, which is live food. Right. This is what we buy. That's why even symbolically, when you look at sacrifice. In any system, you never brought dead animals to sacrifice them. They would be live, and they would be sacrificed while they're living sacrifices on the shrines. So you're up there and you're living with the energy of the gods. You got the waters coming through, natural elements. You're alive again. And now you reach back down into the dead pool of dead things, and you try to pull it up into that realm that you're at. But what the realm says is that, no, that stuff can't be here, so we're going to send you back down. We're going to send you back to the underworld then, if you don't want to respect the Akashic realm where we brought you to. And that's why you got knocked out for that time. Now, of course, there's a biological thing that happened, and we could speak about the digestion and, all the blood had to go to your stomach in order to go through the digestion, and that made you sleep. Sure, but there's something esoteric and symbolic there. And right. Like you said, it came on the heels, which that was critical information. I'm glad you shared that. It came on the heels of a 21-day water fast. So, once you start ascending and you start coming into a new and different place, to now try to resurrect your old patterns, habits, and ideas, it's going to cause that. It's going to cause a complete crash, because what happens is that once you leave that, it's like when we're children and we have a toy or we have a bike or something that we like riding. Right when you get into the point, especially for us, the men listening, you'll relate to this. If you had a bike and you start getting to that point and where your knees are hitting the handlebars, it's like you're getting too big for your bike. That's when right before you got to give it to your little brother, that's when you really dog it out. Because you like, I don't even need this anymore. I'm going to try to jump it off the side of the building. I'm going to do Evel Knievel, and all kind of craziness, because I know I'm getting ready to give it away. So I'll allow the walls of that reality to crumble. They're going to be completely destroyed because I have no use for them anymore. So now going backwards, like Bob Marley said, ever forward. But now I'm going backwards into something and trying to be that again. I'm trying to practice necromancy. What I'm going to have to do is become a living sacrifice in order to live amongst the land of the dead. And it's something critical in this when we're speaking about food and even that idea. We think a lot of times, especially in African tradition, and again, I'm not knocking people who do it. You're doing the right thing, but we got to
approach things with spiritual intelligence. A lot of times we call upon our ancestors, and we do it in a very generic fashion. I call upon the spirit of the ancestors. And sometimes we forget that some of those who are in our ancestral line are just as simple-minded as they were before they left the planet. In some senses, because of their overabundance of simple-mindedness, they're no longer on the planet. So when we call upon those ones, all we're doing is calling dead information back to us. Remember, necromancy or a necromancer is one who divines with the spirits of the dead. Now, in our tradition, we don't really even acknowledge those who are dead. So in the same instance, like, here in North America, we got a lot of deadheads walking around, people who are just walking around in triple stage darkness. They don't want to know anything. They don't want to see anything, and they don't want to hear anything. They're just dead. They're in hell. And we try to go down in hell to bring them up to heaven, like you did with that piece of fish. You were vibrating at heaven, and you try to go to hell to bring it up there with you. And then what occurs is that there's an enormous amount of energy that we lose, an enormous amount of ashe, chi, whatever system you use, whatever you want to call it, moyo, prana. And we lose all of this energy trying to revive people, thoughts, and ideas that never meant to, if someone's not trying to be alive, if someone's not trying to be consciously aware or ascend or elevate their awareness, then why would you want to try to revive them? Knowing good and well that all of your mythology and tradition tells you that if you try to do that, you're going to have to give your own life in the process. So the point you hit is key on that.
Beautiful. 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 I like how you broke that down. Let's get into the community, some further community discussion, because on this show we get into a lot of discussion about uplifting the community, stop working these jobs, developing, what type of plan do you see be the first thing that we need to target or need to address to bring this into fruition? How do you see we need to go about it?
Okay, the first thing is food. I'm going to go back there. Ultimately, it's food, clothing, and shelter. Okay? But it has to start with the food, because that determines our spiritual relationship that we have with everything. And the reason I keep saying spirit, don't think that when I'm saying spirit, I'm taking away from the physical efforts of community building. Even on my own blog talk show, I started a new segment called Thunderground. And on Thunderground, I just address character development and physical things that are needed in order to build community. Because we can get into the esoteric information all day, which is cool, but sometimes we become these esoteric encyclopedias, but there's no actual hand put to the work. So the first thing that we have to put our hand to is not only, like you just said, Brother Yusef, but like I did a 21-day fast, saw all this stuff coming out of me. Now, obviously, all of that excess coming out of you was not only biological, but it was spiritual too. That's why you were able to clear your thoughts and get some work done. And not to mention that, I'm sure you have more energy. So if somebody said, hey, man, can you come help me clear this plot of land? I want to put up a cabin here or something. You now have the energy to get it done, and even the focus, because you're not looking at your watch like, man, it's almost 1 o'clock. I'm ready for lunch. Because a lot of times we time our day on our food addictions. So the first step we have to take in terms of planning is we have to start sitting down and looking at what we're ingesting, and looking at if what we're ingesting leads us towards the purpose of even building community, or if we're just running around in circles, or if we're trying to raise the dead. I feel in this season that's number one in terms of our planning. We have to set some clear objectives, and some realistic objectives. At this point, ideas like, well, we're just going to bang on the system. That's just not realistic, and it's just silly and it's cartoonish. This goes so much further than banging on the system. We have to start looking at what we're ingesting, if we're even ingesting the right ideas and thoughts to do that. I'll give a very easy example that I know you can relate to, Brother Yusef. There was years ago, I was with some of my martial arts brothers, and we had finished a training session, And it was a really good training session. We were doing some. I had got these pistols, and I took the clips out and took the shells out of the head, and we were working on disarming individuals. Because I was my whole thing. I kept getting tired of doing knife training because I was like, that's cool, but we got to start dealing with people who are coming who got guns and holsters on their hips, and how do we get it out the holster, and how do you do it if you're handcuffed, so forth and so on. So we did a session on that, and we were going real good. And I said, again, it's like how we speak about things come to you in different ways at different times. So a lot of times for me, especially at that time period, my meditations always came through when I was fighting. That's when I would get my flashes of insight. And I said, all of this martial art training is excellent, but we're only prepared on one front. And that's a front that we can't hold for very long, because after you get a certain age, I don't care how trained you are, you'll get your behind handed to you. So I said, what we really need to be training on and teaching is law, because that's really, when you're dealing with martial sciences, that's really how we're being attacked and invaded upon the most, is through these.
Now, are you talking, when you say law, because we talk about natural law, cosmic law, are you talking about immutable laws in that sense, or are we talking about some type of positive law, which is man-made law?
I'm talking about both, because it is the man-made laws that oftentimes bring us into a space where we give up our unalienable rights. And if we're not aware on the intent and the warrior tactic, the war tactic that those actual man-made laws represent, then we'll give up our rights when we don't need to. And these are all tactics of warfare. So we're talking about good food versus food that's useless. So if I'm learning how to kick, I could learn how to kick for 20 years and just get my kicks higher and faster, higher and faster, higher and faster. But what do I do when I'm asked for ID? What do I do when I'm pulled over? What do I do when I'm standing in court and they say all rise? Should I even go to court? And if I go to court, do I say this is a special appearance? Do I just say, yeah, I'm here? Do I say I'm a resident? Do I say I have a domicile? We go back and forth with all of them. And that's a form of good food, versus useless food at this point. And I'm not saying for those who are, my martial art brothers and sisters out there, I'm not saying for you to stop your training, because it is the discipline and the preparedness that the training gives you so that you can go into some of these situations and not be afraid. And I'm speaking, from experience. Go ahead, brother, I'm listening.
When I got a little background in spiritual esoteric information as well. I've been doing this for quite a bit of time, and a lot of it was just basically kind of theoretical. I didn't have a lot of, I was kind of like a weekend warrior type. That's just a subject that I like to study, that I like to be knowledgeable as. But as far as any type of application, I'd never really engaged in that until I had an experience myself where I got locked up, and I was totally ignorant. And I got tired of that. And I had to start learning law. I started teaching myself. Where in the course of doing that, I was able to make a connection between these immutable laws, these cosmic laws, and these natural laws, and these positive laws, these maxims in the back of these Black's Law dictionaries. Man-made law rests on natural law principles. If it doesn't, then what you have is, and people listen to me and think about what I'm about to say, if a man makes a law and it's not resting on some sort of immutable principle, then he's trying to be God. You understand what I'm saying? Even though he's insane. And most of them are not doing that. They're not doing that. These man-made laws do derive, they're derivatives out of natural law. It's not recognizable to you because of the form that it's put in. Kind of like religion. People are religious, they can't see the connection between things. But there is a connection. If you go and study the principle of a lot of these man-made laws, you're going to see that the foundation of it rests on some sort of natural law principle, and that you should be learning. So we should be learning. I know in the Kabbalion it says those who serve on the higher rule and the lower, and what that means is those who obey higher laws get to make up the man-made laws that regulate human activity. Basically, the activity of savages, people who do not know how to conduct themselves in accordance with the laws that regulate the universe, and they have to be controlled. And this was a foundational principle that was brought to me, that I began to understand that, hey, people are given the Bible in jail not because that's their religion. They're given the Bible because it's a law book. Mm-hmm. It's a law book. It's a law book, not from the dogmatic sense. You know, I take the dogma out of it, because we have people coming on this show, they're very, very dogmatic. You know, it's Jesus and,
right.
you know, all that. I'm like, you know, they use the name, but they don't listen to what the man was saying.
Right.
You know, yeah, well, Jesus called you a God. We're not gods. Well, right there it says in your Bible that you're a God. Why do you not think you're a God?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you not think you're a God? It says it right there in your book, and they'll ignore it, skip over it, explain it away, anything to keep on petitioning some sort of outside force outside themselves, instead of looking at themselves and understanding the character development is an internal process that begins to manifest and change outside circumstances. But go ahead.
Right. No.
I just want to throw that in.
I mean, you threw a lot in. That's excellent. You know, it expands where we're going, you know, in a beautiful way, because of some of the terminology you use. And for a critical thing too, you know, and I started these talks I've been doing on leadership, and one of the key things that I said, you know, and you and I have discussed this off air before, you know, we have some similarities in our background. I myself have also seen the inside of the belly of the beastly, and you know, have beat heavy football number charges before, where you know, I wouldn't have came home till I was 70, 80 years old. You know, and did that not only using my spiritual intellect and my spiritual power, but also used my spiritual power to make me more intelligent, to tap into a better understanding of what law is. You know, so I think one of the things that I've been speaking on recently in terms of leadership is we have to start looking for leaders who've actually gone through fire. You know, a lot of times, and it's really a sad thing, you know, because when you go onto the internet, you go on the social sites, you go on YouTube or whatever have you, or even Blog Talk Radio, you have this proliferation of people with a lot of information. And we assume because they have a lot of information that they're qualified to lead. You know, so when they start posturing themselves as leaders, we immediately say, oh yeah, that brother, that sister, they got the answer. They, you know, I need to get behind what they're doing. And if this person is only broadcasting from the comfort of their own home, and they're not putting any of these principles into practice, and I'm not just speaking about those who are talking about a cultural and a social and political understanding, or, you know, a spiritual one, or even a legal one. You know, I'm talking about those who are just coming forth with information. You know, if they've not been through a fire, if they've never been tested and used the exact same principles that they're telling you about to either douse that fire or to go through the fire, then what you know, they're giving you that information. You know, I look at now, like, the conscious community to me is basically like Revenge of the Nerds. You know what I mean? If anyone has ever seen that movie. And, you know, you basically have a bunch of weaklings who have now found a platform. You know, and I know, again, we've been in similar situations. You see this when you go into jail. If anybody who's ever been incarcerated before, most of the time when you're dealing with COs, you're not dealing with tough guys. You know, you're dealing with people who got picked on when they're in high school.
Exactly.
You know, and now they get to come in there and, you know, the cool, like they always say, yeah, they want to act hard, or they'll try to be cool with you, you know, because they want to really learn. It's almost like the Rick Ross thing. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to talk to all these high-level drug dealers and people who actually were out here doing things, because that will give me, you know, war stories to go back home and tell my girlfriend, you know. So you'll find some that are real cool. You know, I tell you one thing, even on a sexual tip, and you've probably seen this as well, you know, when you go to jail, a lot of the COs are also, they're living same-sex lifestyles. You know, so they get excessive a lot of times with the strip searches. You go for a visit, they're all in your rectum and all kind of craziness like that. You know, so Yeah, So
that made me think. I said, how could you do a job like this?
And
you
let's
gotta
enjoy
be.
it.
You got. I know you gotta enjoy this. I mean,
right.
some of the most humiliating. Well, we don't want to discuss that.
Right.
Go on.
I know.
Yeah, we have to get into that.
That's generals talk. But so the thing is, like I said, it's kind of like Revenge of the Nerd. You have these people with a lack of character, which is what you said earlier. Now, character is so critical. I did a video on this recently, and I spoke about really defining character because a lot of times we confuse the word character with personality. And it's because we become so eye-centric. And when you're eye-centric, all of the food, because I'm tying it right back into what we're speaking about, all of the food and supposed nutrition that you're going to give to an individual is only food and nutrition that you consider to be helpful for yourself. Character really functions from a we personality or from a we identity. It has nothing to do with really personality, so I shouldn't even use that word. Character functions within the confines of a community. If you do not have a confines of a community, you can never truly discover what your character is. So you can discover what your personality is. You can discover your dispositions, your likes, your dislikes, your moods, even your spiritual expressions. You can discover that in isolation. You don't need a community for that. But your character, which comes from an old word, character, which actually means symbol, or it also means engravement upon the soul. Your character was the symbol that you represented inside of your community, because a community is like a puzzle piece, so you need different pieces. You need different type of people in order to make a community work. So, for instance, on your show, you speak about a lot of law. And I know that because when you do that, we spoke about it, but I've heard the show before. It would not be advantageous to our people for me to come on and say, well, yeah, all that law stuff is good, but you need a spiritual understanding, because
right.
the character or the symbol or the glyph that you currently represent in this community that we're trying to put together is the glyph of law or the character of law. That's your puzzle piece. And then the puzzle piece that I represent is something different. And then you got some people, all they talk about is nutrition.
Right.
It doesn't
Which
qualify.
Is important.
Yeah, that's important. Right, that's a piece because even the law guy, Yusef he had to do a 21-day fast on water. So you see, it's a part of organizing that internal community with all of these different characters and symbols. Now, what I spoke about on previous shows when we're dealing with the Orisha, and I explained that the Orisha are the cosmic characters that govern the evolutionary forces of the universe. And each one has, just like an angel, each one has a certain purpose. You look at like Uriel. Uriel represents the light of God. You look at Raphael. Raphael is the healing of God. Now, Raphael will never try to be Uriel and vice versa. Nor will they ever get down on each other. Like, you need light more than you need healing, or you need healing more than you need light. Because they understand we each represent, and they even have symbols that represent them. But they understand that we represent a symbol in this spiritual community and spiritual ecosystem, and everybody has a place. And when we all come together as angles of God, we create God. We create God by coming together and playing our position. So
now that is an interesting concept because a lot of individuals view God as a. Let's talk about this for a second, because I think this has to be addressed for us to really, this concept of God. Okay, this concept, even that word God, I think is kind of a limiting type term. It doesn't really express the full omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent characteristics of this entity that they call God.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people look at God, they put him in a place in the sky.
Right.
Something that they have to petition outside of themselves. How would you, what concept of God, what is your concept of God? How express? I'm sure people are interested in that, because I think that's a foundational problem, especially when you're speaking to people who are really in dogmatic religion. Their concept of God is, and they don't want to admit this, but it's a white man in a cloud. They won't say it is. They'll say, "No, I don't think that God is white." Yes, you do, because you was raised with it. Mm-hmm. You haven't went through any type of cleansing process because you're still in the confines of the religion that you were raised in, but that you were giving all of those images. So you still see this white Jesus, this white man up in a cloud looking down on everybody and choosing whose prayer he's going to answer. Okay, I think I'm going to answer that guy's prayer over there. I think he prayed hard enough and good enough for me to hear, and I think I'll answer his prayer. And matter of fact, I'm not going to answer this guy's prayer over here because he's a Muslim. And I'm not going to answer this guy's prayer over here because he's Hindu. All of them going to hell. Only this is this concept that they got in their mind.
Right.
And I just think that, but I'd like to let you speak on that a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's key. What you said, like you said, if I pray hard enough, he'll listen to me, but he won't listen to you because you got a different religion. And, we do have a mental image and a stain of God. Now, I have to precursor my answer by also saying that I'm using the term God because I'm speaking to a general audience. I'm not totally...
Right. I understand. I understand. Okay. I understand.
So
I understand that.
My understanding or my knowing about what God is an unknowing. God is not something that can truly be known. What most of us perceive as God, when we use that term God, we're talking about something that we made up, that we created, because either our mother didn't breastfeed us long enough, or we were really sad and lonely when she stopped answering us every time we cried. So when you come into a place where you now realize that, okay, I'm on my own and the life that I have is the life that I make, we have two choices that we can make. We can either say, okay, you know what, I'm going to woman up or I'm going to man up, and I'm going to start reacting and responding to the journey of life in a way that is empowering. I'm going to self-empower by my reactions, my proaction, or I'm going to find a new mama. I'm going to find a new teat to suck on. Something that whenever I call out to it, it's there. It's waiting for me. When I get hurt, it feels my pain. It's crying for me, things like that, so forth and so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a God, or I'm going to find someone else's interpretation of a God, and I'm going to get with that, whatever suits me the best for what I need at the moment. So in most senses, one of the reasons why God is such a small term and word to use is because God is a man-made construct. God doesn't call itself God. God doesn't even speak. God functions and responds to us through soul symbols and not even through language. So there's more than two, but there's two impressions and perceptions of God. So that's the one side, the man-made side, which is the apparent. Now, the real, true, and living God is reflected in us. God is a child. God is a child full of wonderment, okay, as we perceive what a child is. To kind of explain this a little bit better, maybe I need to pull from the Kabbalah sense. And from the Kabbalah, before you have the first Sephiroth of Kether, which is one, which means the crown, you have Ein, Ein Sof, and Ein Sof And in a nutshell, these three energies that exist before Kether exist inside of the womb, inside of the cipher, the zero. Okay, they exist before the one. Remember, Kether is one, that's the crown. And the one is what we perceive to be God, okay, which is something that you can define. Whenever you can define that highest energy, then you're dealing with something that came out of nothingness. Okay, very similar to our Kemetic studies where we read that Ra unfurled itself and Ra created itself out of the nothingness, out of the darkness. Well,
some no thing to something in the Kabbalion, they call it the differentiated came out of the undifferentiated.
Yeah, exactly. The differentiated came out of the undifferentiated. So part of that also represents what we are. We are differentiated reflections of the soul that came out of undifferentiated matter that we call our mother's bush or the womb, okay, in a physical sense. So in the same instance, when we're understanding this concept of God, the first thing to understand is the concept of self, the concept of consciousness. Now, does that mean that when we deal with the soul, we're saying that, okay, well then, when I'm functioning and I'm being good and I'm acting a certain way, I'm now being God. No, you're not at all. When you're functioning in the character as dictated by your soul, when your soul creates a place in the community and you're functioning within that character, then you are in fact reflecting the energy of God. But you are not God in that moment, because if you was, your body would explode because your nervous system couldn't handle the fullness of it. Moses just saw the backside, the shadow of God, and his hair turned white. So what do you think would happen to you? So, and of course, again, we're speaking about mythology. But what it's basically saying is that we don't have the capacity in human form to fully express our godhood. Now, does that mean that we're not God? No, we are God. But what we see is the reflection of God. We don't see God in each other, like we say. We like to say that a lot because we don't see the soul. We don't have the potential. Psychology actually is what it basically means. Psychology is the study of touching the soul. So psychology is actually a religion. It deals with the goddess psyche. It's the soul. So we know, again, that's tricknology, okay, because one cannot touch the soul. One can touch the expressions of the soul, certain things that we do, our music, our dance, our speech, the affection and love that we have for one another. Those are reflections of the soul or reflections of God, the higher self, but they're not actually that God. So God is, the real and living God is truly undefinable. When we begin to define, like again, dealing with the crown, Kether, the moment you start defining, you're dealing with an after effect of what God actually is.
I've said that on so many shows. I said, and all the great minds in history said that God is unknowable and undefinable. Mm-hmm. And when you look at anything, because you're looking at a vibrational frequency, once you have movement, now you have creation. You have something coming out of nothing into something. Right. Something is a vibrational force. It has movement. Everything is really a composite of the same thing, just expressed in different forms. But the origin or the source is unknowable and undefinable. But they like to call it like a living spirit or the ether. You have all these different names for it. It's unknowable and undefinable. Even Tahuti even said this himself.
Mm-hmm. Right. And the thing is, we shouldn't seek for definition of everything, because when you're defining everything, right, you're bringing order to it. It's very similar to, let's take music for a moment. I'm a musician, and I've been a musician since I was preteen. It's when I started playing instruments, even at a professional level. And the first thing people would ask me, certain people, as soon as they found out, oh, you play piano or you play guitar, the first thing they would say is, do you read music? Now, yeah, I was just fortunate in that I did read music, because I taught myself to read music. Then I had an instructor for a little while. But I was also very proud of the fact that, especially when I started playing with other types of musicians that, they played by ear. I was very proud of the fact that I had my ear training was really quick. I could listen to a song once and figure it out and start playing it. So when people would ask, do you read music? I would say, yeah, but I mainly play by ear, because that's what I was actually really proud of. And then you would see the look of disappointment on their faces. Oh, okay. Like one of those. You're one of those gutter musicians in the juke joint, But my whole feeling on that was that music is to be heard, not looked at. You're not supposed to watch music. You're supposed to listen to music, feel music, but there are individuals that would seek to define music. See, music is so powerful in all of our traditions because it's one of the only things, music and dance, that you do that doesn't require calculation, even though we think it does. The only reason you think that music requires calculation is because somebody told you to count everything out. And the reason they told you to count everything out is so that they can get down with the party. Back in the days, it was for a long time, John Coltrane was banned from the radio. Literally, they had whitelisted him, and he wasn't allowed to be on any stations because his music changes were unchartable. So because they would do these things in musicians where they would play and then they would break everything down where everybody would just go free form, and then they would come back on the one. Now, even me, I've done that playing on stage with cats, but I still can't explain how we do that. I can't explain how we all doing our own thing, and then somehow instinctively we all know that to hit back together, da 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 da, bah, and then we just come right back in together. That's a reflection of the soul when you're moving beyond calculation.
Yes, it is.
And in truth,
yes, it is.
It's pure chaos. Okay? Chaos, what they call chaos magic. Chaos magic is jazz music, where it's just complete ad-libbing, but there is still a form and an order. It's organized chaos. Now, trying to put that and write that on paper, try to transcribe that into notes or bring it into your computer and put it into a quantized grid, it takes the soul out of it. It makes it very stiff, sterile, and inorganic. So to me, that's when God, as most people perceive it, is created. When you take that which is chaotic and unknown, that can only be felt if you have a soul, and you strip it and transcribe it into something that you can define and then reproduce. A good example of this is if anyone has ever watched Justin Timberlake dance. That's a transcribing of something. And probably told, well, he could dance, but just look at how stiff he is. Okay, because now,
and I was about to say that soulless individuals have to be able, like right now in rap, they're saying that we have certain individuals. They're you even have people saying that like Eminem is the greatest rapper of all time. I mean, I can't believe that they would say that, but this only became possible after 30 years of them being able to study and transcribe an art form that came directly from our soul.
Right. So in essence, we've accepted the new art form, though, because if we understood, like you said, it came directly from our souls, because you listen to the earlier hip hop records, they didn't really make sense. So you knew it wasn't really about us making some profound literary impact. It was about doing something that people felt, because you had all that scatting in it, hip hop, hip hop to the that don't even make sense. But the thing about it is that we felt it because it was a language that was programming and speaking to our DNA. It was bringing a rise about. It was good food. It was live food. That food was enlivened. And then what happened was around the mid 80s, you had mid to late 80s, you had this influx of all this sampling, not so much the sampling, but the synthesized music. You had all these drum machines. Because the earlier hip-hop records, what they did was they would get bands to come in and replay popular R&B songs, top 40 hits that was already out. They would have bands come into the studio and replay them, and then they would rhyme over that. So you still had this live element. And then around the mid to late 80s, you had all of these like different drum machines that came out and synthesizers, and that began the bastardization of real music. Okay, because if I can use a synthesizer or a drum machine, then all I have to do is press buttons with my finger and I can get a computer to program that. So the trap, see, God doesn't function in light and dark. God doesn't function in 0 and 1s. God has no trap or polarity. But when you're dealing with the computer, you're dealing with binary code. It's just zeros and it's just ones. That's it, which means it's off or it's on. It's male or it's female. So now if I'm able to take this soul music, like you just said, this is something that came from the soul. If I'm able to take that music and transcribe it into a computer, take the drum kicks, the synthesizers, the bass lines, even the voice, and make it so that a computer can reproduce it, then now I've just brought it into the land of the dead. I took it out of the land of the living and into the land of the dead, and I'll even get those who were once living to buy into it. They'll even buy it. That's why you don't really have too much live music, period, or too many live hip-hop groups. We have some, but they're a minority. But we have more people who are using grids to put music together. They're looking on a computer screen and just clicking around, and that's how they're forming their music. So that's the same thing that we're speaking about, and that becomes the new food. So the new food that you're eating musically, your musical food, is dead food. So now when you try to create live ideas or real ideas, like in terms of building community, because all of your food now is artificial, you only want to build an artificial community. You want to go on Facebook and start a new group, or on whatever other social site, and now you got this new online community. But it's online means it's dead. You want these communities because everything you've been ingesting has been fake. It's been unreal. So now your creations are unreal. But when you tap back into that real energy, and again, I'm still answering the question of what's the plan? How do we begin to create community? The first thing, like I said, is looking at the food that we're eating, because our food is going to govern what our expressions are going to be. And if we're feeding our soul artificial material, the soul will continue to be enlivened. Like the laws of Ma'at say, I have not, I have not, I have not, which means that the soul is going to stay perfect. You ain't messing up the soul. You'll mess up your spirit. The spirit can be influenced. The spirit can be influenced by sound and light. Scientists have figured that one out. In Russia, they figured that one out. Where they did even the sand test. If anybody's ever seen that one, where they put sand on a drum skin and then they put certain sounds through it, and they find that these real beautiful patterns are made in the sand. This is what helped them to understand that even DNA molecules can be reprogrammed and reshaped by the use of certain sounds and rhythms. And these sounds can even be attuned, or you can attune the human voice to affect these patterns. They also discovered that with light, where they shined a laser light, a photon light through DNA molecules. And they found what happened was that the light turned into a spiral, and the spiral went around the molecules. Now, what was real deep about that, now remember, the spiral and spirit are the same exact word. So what was real deep about that was that when they removed the DNA molecules, the light spiral was still there. It didn't dissipate. So that was a form of not only light bending and going around and touching the DNA, but how the spirit, because remember the spiral, the light is spirit, the spirit can be affected by the DNA code. Okay.
Now, that's very interesting. I used to work for U.S. Sprint a long time ago when they first came out with fiber optics. Mm-hmm. And when fiber optics is a very, very advanced technology. Still to this day, they haven't used its full potential. But essentially, it's taking it's off the tip of my tongue, but it's taking sound and changing it into light waves. That information can be sent through light, and it changes from an analog sound into a light frequency.
Right.
And this light frequency, these fiber optic strands can hold like 1,000. The length of a hair, it's about as big as a hair, can carry 1,000 of these frequencies at one time. This is why they can do the video and the audio and everything going over one, and the internet over one little strand of hair. And it's interesting because that concept it seems like it ties into that. They can put information into your DNA molecules by using light.
Right. Light and sound. And of course, the original intent of this research was to repair DNA molecules. That's what they were saying.
Right.
And they do that. In Russia, this is actually how they do DNA cell repair. Over here, it's a much more intrusive process, the way they actually do the repair process. In Russia, they just use laser lights. But of course, when they did that, they figured out, by using different spectrums and frequencies of light, not only can we repair the DNA molecules, but we can reprogram. We can put, like you said, like over fiber optics, we can put information into those cells by the light that it ingests. Okay, now it's so critical to remember that every macrocosmic representation of what we see out here in the world is a product of a microcosmic expression. So what happens down at the cellular level is going to happen also at the social level. Again, going back to the food that we ingest. So, like you said, we switched from analog phone lines, and then we went to digital phone lines. So what was once something that was undefinable can now be defined by zeros and ones. No different than when we stopped using vinyl and acetate records, acetate CDs even. because with vinyl covered a much, much wider frequency expression in terms of your high frequencies and your low frequencies. And then we went from vinyl, we went to tape, which was a little bit less, but it was still analog. From tape, we went to CD, which was 16-bit, 44 kilohertz. Now we broke it down into bits. As soon as you see the word bits, you know you're dealing with data, computer data, zeros and ones.
And let me say this about MP3. I was a part of the hacker community in the early 90s when MP3 started in the underground with hackers.
Right.
They needed to get information through because, you know, we had dial-up back then. And, you know, one song is about 70, 80 megabytes. They compressed it. What people don't understand about MP3 is you're removing all of the bits of information that are inaudible to the human ear and compressing it down to 3 megabytes.
Right.
So you're really listening to a song. It's not even the real song. It's missing so much information is missing from it, but it's just inaudible to the ear.
Right.
It's got to have an effect. It has to have some sort of effect. Now, I used to own a recording studio, too, and what we used to always say is that analog music had a warmer, people would always say, give it this expression, had a warmer sound, the analog, as opposed to the digital.
Right.
You know, we used to always say that.
You're absolutely right. You know, because there's a couple of things here to consider. When they compress MP3s through that process, what they also do is they use dithering. And dithering basically puts static in where like, let's say once it's compressed and they extract certain sound out of it, then there's holes in the file. There's holes in the wave frequency. So dithering puts static where those holes once were. Now, when you hear a drum kick, a boom, you're not really supposed to be able to hear the static that's in between. You're not supposed to. But number one, what is that static sending? What information is that static sending? Number
subconscious is picking it up.
Of course it is. And the other piece about that is, who determines what my ear can hear and not hear? Who makes that determination? Whose ear are we talking about? You know, for instance, when you look at the standard tuning, which is 440 kilohertz, 440 kHz. That's the standard tuning that we use for pianos, guitars, anything that we use in the scale, the major and minor scale that we use here. It's based on that tuning, that frequency range. Now, the challenge with that is that when the Moors came through Europe, they started the first classical music. I'm going to call them classical music because that's the music that we know it as. But they started the first music conservatories that were in Europe. And there's a saying that we use often that was actually a Moorish saying, and that's music soothes the savage beast. They started these music conservatories because they would bring, it's an instrument, an old instrument called a lyre. They had the lyre and they had the lutes. And these were 4-string instruments, okay? And each string on the instrument was tuned to a different part of the body. Like one was tuned to the endocrine system, and another one was tuned, you know, to how the endocrine system works with the endorphins. And, you know, so what would happen was that when they played these instruments, the conservatories were not for people to come to and play cards and listen to music and smoke cigarettes. The conservatories were actually healing clinics. So if you were having a sickness, you would come in and they would play this music in front of you, and it would realign your chakras. Okay, that was the original intent. So the music, when you take out the tuning or you change the tuning, that tuning will speak to different parts of your body. Now, whose body is the music now tuned to is the number one question, and what effect is it having on everybody else? Now, there are some who have studied and said that 440 is a universal frequency. It doesn't harm anybody. It's okay, because they do understand that certain frequencies are harmful. And again, remember, and I want everyone who's listening to put everything that we're saying in the context of the ingestion of food, because the music and the frequencies are what you're ingesting. And like Brother Yusef just said, when we're talking about the hearing or the static, it's still picked up on a subconscious level. And that's the last place you want to ingest the wrong stuff, is in the subconscious, because it's extremely hard to get it out. once it gets down in there, that's where you got some trouble at. You know, so the tuning and the music and the moving from analog to digital has a profound effect on things. I owned a recording studio as well for many years. I still do have a little studio, but I had a 24-track analog 2-inch machine long after it was in vogue or in style to have them. You know, everyone was moving to a system called Pro Tools, which was basically, you're familiar, it was all digital.
Yeah, and which is all the rage right now.
Right, because it's easier. It's, you know, I don't have to worry about tapes. I mean, I still got stacks of tapes in my garage. And, you know, there's a certain care that you got to show to them. But because I had...
Yeah, I remember when I went from ADAT to DATs.
ADAT, right.
You know.
ADAT was the introduction. You know, and you can hear it in the music if you listen over the years, because one interesting thing that happened when ADAT came in some of the earlier songs, if you listen to Mariah Carey, Dream Lover, that song was done on ADAT. That was one of the early ADAT cuts that were done. And you hear the level of what we call compression. And compression is when you have less dynamics. Like, you know, if you listen to a snare, when a snare hits, it's that initial whack of the stick hitting the drum skin, but then there's like a sizzle that also happens afterwards, where you hear the snare sizzling on the drum skin. When you compress things, you might just hear the whack, but you don't hear the sizzle. Okay, because we're trying to get as much information or data into this little stream of space that we have, so we're going to get rid of some of the extra stuff. But one of the things that you saw that continued to be sampled and never was able to be reproduced digitally, and this is how you knew something was up, was James Brown. If you listen to James Brown's drum rhythms, it's so syncopated, but it's so much feel that you can't really get a computer to reproduce it because it's just too subtle. So when people they would still sample James Brown. They wouldn't try to recreate on the computer because you can't. You know, but this goes to show, again, we're dealing with soul. There are messages, energies, and sounds that come from the soul that cannot be reproduced with a dead instrument like a computer. So in the same instance, you got your dead food. Dead food can't reproduce the messages that live food would give to it. Okay, and then you have to determine what live food is for you. In the same instance, when you're doing necromancy, what ancestors are for you, which ones have the messages for you, because even some of the ones that mean good for you could still end up being agents. And what I mean by being agent is that, you know, you may have some that you start getting into esoteric information and they're still trying to bring you back to religion. They mean good, just like when they were on the planet, so they start creating blockages and obstacles in your path. So part of your determination is figuring out who's for you and who's for the direction that you're moving into. And the same thing with your food, your physical food. What food accommodates where you're trying to go into? For instance, like you said, I don't really think eating meat is for us. That's probably true. I mean, there's so much information that kind of proves that probably is true. But one of the things that happens to some people that may not be good for those particular people is that when they don't eat meat, they lose a lot of their aggression and their edge. Now, some people in our community, we may still want them to have their aggression and their edge, depending on what their symbol and their role is. You know, so one of the things we have to go through is learn, well, what's for us and what's not for us. You know, some of us, we need to come off the meat to pull down that aggression because our bodies are too acidic. That's why we're so aggressive towards one another. You know, so it's a process of determining. And again, we're speaking about community building and all of the food that goes into your supposed community. And your first community is yourself, the community itself, your own internal structure. And the food that comes in, whether it be the light code frequencies, whether it be the sound frequencies, or you know, whether it be the information, and all of it's information. Your food carries information. It carries a DNA code. And all of that can be programmed. And if the programming speaks to, or the syntax, if that syntax and that programming speaks to somebody else's mission, you're constantly going to be fighting against yourself to resurrect something that's dead. And this is one of the key reasons why we actually don't have a real community. You know, again, we're speaking parathenically when we say things like the community or the black community or whatever. We don't have one. And we got to start taking our first steps to creating one. And the first step, well, let's look at what we're ingesting. And I want to be clear on something. Our ingesting is not what's good or what's bad. Throw that out for a minute. That I learned from Bruce Lee. You talk about where you get different things from. Bruce Lee, when they asked him, how does he get his punches so quick? And his answer, you can see when he answered that, they were like, what the heck is he talking about? But, it was only for certain people to pick up on. And he said, there is no good or bad. He said that it just is. He said, that's why my punches are so quick. And it seems like one thing is not related to the other. But what he was saying is that whether I get hit or whether you get hit, I have no attachment to it. I just do what I need to do in the moment and I let it flow. It just is. So this is a time where we have to start looking at our own isness, with the things that we need to ingest. For instance, I listen to a lot of what one would call hardcore hip hop. I enjoy it. Now, it has elements in it that may be derogatory in some senses, but it helps me to keep my edge.
It's real. You know what I'm saying? Right. It's just, you know what I'm saying? Like, I listen to Ice Cube. I still listen to a lot of the old school hardcore hip hop artists, because I just feel like they just more in tune with reality, Right. But these new cats are just, they own some type of fantasy land,
Yeah.
I don't know, but I just can't feel them like that,
Right. It's part of a movement that came about to universalize everyone. Now the new movement, with hip hop is metrosexual. And the metrosexual movement took over, and that started years ago.
Yeah.
And what that does is that, it universalizes things and it creates a sexual and ethnic ambiguity. So if I have sexual and I have ethnic ambiguity, I really don't know where to begin for community building because I really don't know what community is mine. Especially if you're causing me to now universalize everything into an amorphous blob. So everybody is just joined together. Everybody is doing the same thing. We're all one, but we're not sharing all in the same benefits of being one. So like you said, that music is real, and that music is real for you. I wouldn't necessarily recommend, like when I'm in my car, I turn that off. I turn to some jazz or something like that, something that's more universal, because that programs and feeds my DNA. That's good food for me to do what I need to do, especially because, real simple example, what I do spiritually oftentimes is I'm confronted once in a while, because my perspective, even on the Yoruba tradition and many other traditions, is much broader. It's not religious, so I include other elements into what I do. And there are a lot of people who are against that. They'd say you should not only do that, but, they'll feel some type of way about me doing that. So, me listening to certain music or having an intrinsic disposition, I already have an intrinsic F the world, I don't care attitude. So when I listen to that type of music, it reminds me of that. It helps me to keep that edge. And if I didn't have that disposition and if I didn't have that mindset, I wouldn't be teaching the things that I'm teaching today. Because my sensitivity would have said, well, I don't want to offend anybody, or I don't want to offend anybody's religious stance and anything. So let me just go with the grain, So that becomes good food for me. And what we have to determine, depending on our symbol in the community, and my community and my symbol, I'm that rogue barbarian. And the rogue barbarian is a Hercules or Ogun or Gabriel type of energy. And that's the energy that comes in to save the town. And then once he finishes saving the town, because he does what nobody else has the stomach to do, but needs to be done. He comes and he saves everybody, and then he leaves.
Right.
He wanders off on his horseback.
Hey, let's do this.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do this. We're going to take a quick break, about a 2-minute break. We got a lot of people on the line listening, some with their hands up. Feel like fielding some phone calls?
I sure do.
We call it going through the obstacle course. Obstacle course. When you come on this show, it's okay. You ready to go to the obstacle course now?
Not a problem.
All right. Let's take a quick break. The phone lines are open. The call-in number is 424-222-5250. You are listening to High Frequency Radio. I'm your host, Yusef, with a special guest, Chief
Yuya
Assaan-ANU.
You could just
Yuya.
say Yusef, brother. No, Yusef is the same name as Yuya. It's the same word.
Same word.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, y'all. We'll be back right after this, okay?
The Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. When you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. And many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it. Were you listening to me, Neo? Or were you looking at the woman in the red dress? I was. Look again. Breathe it. This isn't the Matrix. No. It's another training program designed to teach you one thing. If you are not one of us, you are one of them. What are they? Sentient programs. They can move in and out of any software still hardwired to their system. That means that anyone we haven't unplugged is potentially an agent. Inside the Matrix, they are everyone, and they are no one. We have survived by hiding from them, by running from them. But they are the gatekeepers. They are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys, which means that sooner or later, someone is going to have to fight them. Someone. I won't lie to you, Neo. Every single man or woman who has stood their ground, everyone who has fought an agent has died. But where they have failed, you will succeed. Why? I've seen an agent punch through a concrete wall. Men have emptied entire clips at them and hit nothing but air. Yet their strength and their speed are still based in a world that is built on rules. Because of that, they will never be as strong or as fast as you can be. What are you trying to tell me? That I can dodge bullets? No, Neo. I'm trying to tell you that when you're ready, you won't have to.
All right, y'all. I'm back. You're listening to High Frequency Radio. We're going in today. You still with me, brother?
I'm right here, brother.
All right. Well, we got some people on the phone line. The phone lines are opening up, y'all. This brother's going in real deep. So I'm sure we're gonna have some I'm gonna start out with this brother Gerald. Now, this brother right here, I'm gonna let in. He is a Christian brother. He is the to me demonstrates the typical Christian that you're going to find on the street, the adherent that is not wavering in any kind of way. It is the Christian way or it's no way.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to let him in first. I'm going to let Brother Gerald in. Let me go. He said he has some special points made from a Christian perspective. Brother Gerald coming out of Los Angeles. Brother Gerald, how you doing, brother? I can hear you loud and clear, brother. We can hear you.
Oh, okay. Well, as we had talked last week, I always get very suspicious when people come in and they talk about there is no good and there is no evil when during their discussion. Just like you were reading that book the other day, the author started introducing valuations of certain activities, like for a woman to poison herself with.
Wait, hold on. First of all, before you go deep into, because you're kind of getting off point what we're talking about today. But let me say this. Hold on. Let me say this.
Go ahead.
Good and evil are labels. There's not to say that there's no positive or negative, or there's no agreeable or disagreeable. But good and evil is a label that you have devised, that you've come up with, because the evil would not have existed if God, the God that you claim that you follow, had not created it.
Well, I disagree.
Now you try. Now that right there babbles the mind, because how could anything exist if God did not allow it to come into existence?
Okay, well, if you look back at the beginning of the Bible story, before man was even created, God assigned the valuation of everything that he did as being good. So good, in and of itself.
Wait a minute. First of all, that was written in Hebrew. Okay,
right,
and they use the word tov and ra, and it really means agreeable and disagreeable.
Well, it was a valuation. This
is why we're doing Hebrew class. This is why we're doing Hebrew class.
Okay.
This is why we're doing Hebrew class. And wait a minute. Let me say this. Let me say this also, that you don't know what language God spoke, because Hebrew, there's no such word as Hebrew. Ibri means to cross over. And when we go back, Abraham came out of Ur of Chaldea. So we're talking about Chaldean, which is Babylon. And the original language of the Babylon, which is the oldest written language we can find, well, there may be some debate with hieroglyphics, is cuneiform.
Okay, I have no disagreement with everything you say.
If we're going to talk correctly about what God said, all right, let's get into it. Really, what God said. You don't really know what God said, because the language that you're reading it in is not the original language that it was spoken in.
Okay, so if that's going to be the foundation upon which you disavow the Bible, at what point does any communication...
I didn't disavow the Bible. You didn't hear me say anything. I just don't have the same... No, whoa, stop.
I can't discern what was actually stated or the intent of it.
Wait a minute, stop. And what I'm not going to let you do is put words into my mouth. I use the Bible on this show all the time.
And
I don't interpret the Bible the same way that you do. My truth is not your truth. And you're entitled to your opinion, and you're entitled. Wait a minute, hold on, stop for a second. You're entitled to your opinion and your truth, but you're not going to foist that onto me, because your understanding is different than mine, and your experiences and your level of study is different than mine.
So 1 + 1 can equal something other than 2.
Yes, it can. 1, and then I can take the cross, the 2. I can make 1 + 1 = 4. That's 4 marks.
Well, if there's no universal bridge for us to communicate coherently, and coherently means you understand what I'm saying and I understand what you're saying.
And the way that you can do that would be through...
You quoted the Bible, and even your guest quoted the Bible. What I'm trying to understand, and this is where we're trying to get on a higher frequency. We're trying to become universal. We're trying to get in harmony. The whole point of me even bringing up that point of discussion last week was because I'm trying to get the listeners, as well as you as a host, as well as the guests that come on the show, to be consistent in their usage of terms and be consistent in expressing themselves.
Wait a minute, we are consistent in usage of terms. You just don't understand. Okay. Wait a minute, see, you, because of your separate mentality, because you're not able to piece things together, to you it seems like we're inconsistent. I am consistent in my usage of terms. Okay, I don't have any inconsistency whatsoever.
Okay, well, let me make my point. During this conversation, we were talking about there not being any good, and ultimately we're supposed to, or in fact, the host, the guest on the show was talking about.
Why don't you allow our guest to explain? Wait a minute, why don't you do this? Why don't you allow our guest to explain what he means when he says there is no good and evil? Why don't you let him do that right now?
What do you mean when you say there's no good, no evil? Because I'll go back to the Bible. Before man was created, the Bible states that every action that the Creator took was good. So without man being present, without any physical, moral action on man's part, good existed before human beings existed.
So you're saying that good... Wait a minute, let me ask you. Wait a minute, hold on. let's take your concept. You're saying good existed before human beings existed.
Yeah.
Now, did evil exist before human beings existed?
If the foundation of reality...
Answer the question. It's just a yes or no question. It's just a yes or no question.
The foundation, listen, the foundation of all reality is good. And any deviation from the intent of the founder of reality is bad. And that's the whole concept of sin. This is the whole idea of us having an expectation in terms of our actions.
I understand what you're saying. Let our guest answer your question. All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Because there would be an argument. I wouldn't have an argument with you, Yusef, if you really believe that. But the thing is, you go on tears where you basically talk about how you're frustrated that the black people just don't. We don't know.
No, the source.
We continue to stay ignorant.
No, what I'm trying to say is you getting wrapped up in words and terms. That's what you wrapped up in. But let me go. Let me let my guest talk now.
Please.
Okay, so and as concisely as you can, Brother Gerald, could you give me your question?
Oh, well, if you say there's no good, but then you talk about certain foods that you gravitate to and certain foods you steer away from, how is this determination made, and why is there a need for us to even make that evaluation at all?
Okay, so what you're asking is, why should we determine what works for us and what doesn't work for us?
Yes, and on what basis are you going to make that determination?
Well, I think within the syntax of the question, the answer is to be found, because we have to find out what works for us and what doesn't work for us. Because if we're doing something that doesn't work for us, then we're detracting ourselves away from our life purpose. One of the challenges, I think, Brother Gerald, and what you're saying in terms of evaluation when you're saying good versus bad, the good or bad is based on our logic, and that's based on the logic that we feel as underlined by our emotions at the time. Something that could happen that's bad for you, but that would be good for me. So how would we define that? You may lose your job, and I may be hired for that position. So is that something that was good or bad? So I think one of the challenges that we're having, and Brother Yusef kind of hit upon it, is the use of our words, is the use of our terminology. It's important for us to determine what works for us. And I don't know, you didn't say it out of your own mouth, Brother Yusef did, but I'm going to go with that a little bit. You said that you're a Christian. So if you are a Christian, then there had to have been some form of judgment or determination that the Christian way of life works for you. The Christian way of life produces for you and aligns you and connects you with your Creator. Now, could we say that it is good for you? Sure, we could use that terminology, but ultimately, it's what works for you.
I think that people have a hard time grasping that concept when they say, well, there's no good and evil. They don't ever hear the next part. I say there's an agreeable and disagreeable. What's good for you may not be good for me. Earlier when I said about the fish, he pointed out, he said, notice, write down what he said. It wasn't good for me. My physiological makeup may be different from yours. Therefore, I can ingest different food than you can eat. So it's like certain foods may not be good for me because I may be constituted differently than you. And then there may be certain foods that are good for you that are not good for me. All right? Now, you can use the term good and evil. All right? I don't choose to use that term. I used to use the term agreeable and disagreeable. There are certain things that are disagreeable to me, and there are certain things that are agreeable to me. There are certain things that may be agreeable for you, and there are certain things that may be disagreeable. It's not agreeable for me to believe in the dogmatic religion of Christianity because I've elevated past that. I've had a lot of experience, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding that has been presented to me that has changed my paradigm that won't allow me to go back and wallow in a belief system that I know is built on, that has been plagiarized from more ancient systems. I can't do that. Now, because you haven't been exposed to the same information as me, you may in some shape, form, or fashion deem what I'm saying is evil.
No, what you're talking about is such...
But wait a minute. Oh, let me finish. That's coming from your perception. Wait a minute. That's coming from your perception. No, it's subjective.
Everything you just said was subjective. You said what's agreeable to you may not be agreeable to me.
How's that subjective?
That's subjectivism. And then, wait, it's subjective because that's what you believe is agreeable for you.
Exactly. That doesn't make it good or evil because you don't know what's good or evil. You're not God. You're not God. Wait a minute, hold on. Hey, Gerald, you're not God. So you don't know what good or evil is. You're not God.
Right. Now,
you can't tell me what's good or evil.
Okay, but you said the only way. Okay,
so then, wait a minute, hold on. You're not the creator. Right. You can't tell me what's good or evil. You can't tell me what's good for me or what's evil for me. You can't do that.
Why not?
You don't know.
On what basis do you say that I can't do that?
You don't know that, all right? I don't know what's good or evil for you. That's why I said don't judge. You're not. You can't judge, sir. You can't judge because you don't have the requisite knowledge to judge. You don't have enough knowledge to judge anyone.
That is true. That is true. But you.
Then why are we into this discussion about what is good or evil? The only thing the demarcation line, the only thing that can determine what's agreeable or disagreeable is universal law, laws that are immutable, all right, which you would call God's laws, all right? And if you are following them, you're either following them or you don't. If you follow the law, there will be a cause and effect associated with that. There's going to be a corresponding effect. Now, whether your interpretation of that effect is good or evil, that's all based on something that you interpret. You're based on your perception.
And I agree 100% with you, Yusef. But listen now, because, for all of this discussion, you keep coming back to me with the same thing, and I'm trying to give you something a little different so you can see and understand. Because you're assuming, you are assuming without allowing me to state my case, the point I'm trying to make. Now, you say that I don't have the power to judge and I don't have the power to define or determine truth for you. So at what point do you make the determine of us all becoming or getting to this universal high frequency? If there's this universal high frequency, there's got to be a point in which truth is irrelevant of what you feel about it and what I feel about it. Would you agree?
Perception. What it is it's your... Wait a minute. I'm asking you if you will listen. It is your perception. If we look at the same thing...
That's
this is what... And I'm going to give you this in law. This is why they tell you in law, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The Miranda. This is what all police are. Now, do you know why they tell you that? They tell you that because we can all see the same thing, but our interpretation of it could be different. You don't have any right, if a police officer gets on the stand and he starts testifying to something, and you start saying, that's a lie. What is he talking about? That's a lie. That's not what happened. Who are you to tell this officer what he saw?
Okay, so we're not in a court of law. We're in life. And the
same principle applies. Your perception, depending on your development, your perception of reality may be different from mine. It doesn't make it good or evil. It's just a different perception. All right? So you don't have no right to tell this man on the stand what he saw. Because you don't know. He may have, for instance, if you look at a picture and it's green, all right, you have cones and rods in the eyes. You may see it as blue or something like that. The cones and rods in his eye may be a deficiency and give him color blindness. He may not see it the same way that you see it. So his truth may be different than your truth.
No, but that doesn't take away the fact that there is an object there for you to see. and that
it doesn't. It doesn't, and that's it doesn't. What it does say is your perception of what both of us see. My interpretation of what I see may be different from your interpretation. It doesn't make it good or evil. It makes it different.
Right, what you are a proponent of is self-righteousness. My perception is the right perception. Your perception is not the right perception. No,
all right?
No, that's not true.
Self-righteous.
That's not true. Okay, well, let me tell you what I am representing. I'm not representing self-righteousness because that's a state of pride, and nobody really can become a Christian, a true Christian. Not these people that go to church and fornicate during the week. Not these people that say, well, God understands me. Because you want to try to pigeonhole me when I get on this call as being one of those kind of people. And I've actually shared with the listeners on this program a lot of the stories because a lot of what I experienced didn't come out of what I thought and what all my friends told me to do as being the right thing to do. It came out of what God said, and against everything in my spirit, everything in my reasoning powers said, you need to do totally opposite of what God told me to do.
Okay,
so
stop. Okay, wait a minute, stop. Wait a minute. Okay, I got it. Okay. Do you see how when you come on the show and how you talk, you say everything you do come out of what God said. Okay, so God spoke to you.
No.
Oh, wait a minute, hold on, stop. Because I got to move on to the next caller. God spoke to you. Okay, you everything you do is out of what God said. That's the same thing a Muslim will say. Everything he do, Allah said. All right. He has a different book that he's read. A Hindu will say the same thing. Everything they do, Brahma told them to do. Right. Everybody it doesn't make it good or evil. All right. So God spoke to you in the way that God spoke to you, and how God spoke to you, that is for you. That's not for me. It's not for me. It's for you. He spoke to you in a certain way. He didn't speak to me in that way. He spoke to you in a certain way.
Well, he speaks to all of us in a universal way, and that's through his creation. Now, after that, he speaks to us specifically through divine revelation. Now, you say God is unknowable, but how do you know that? I ask you, how do you know he's unknowable?
I'm going to let our guest answer that. Because I'm just taking over the call. Listen, wait a minute. Listen. I'm going to let him answer that question. Okay. How do we know God is unknowable? And then we're going to move on.
How do you know that?
Okay.
God is unknowable.
Okay. Well, first I'll say this. And Gerald, I do hear your attempt, to try to bring some of your information to the table. And, I am appreciative of that. But you began your statement by saying that this is when I get suspicious when certain people say this. When certain people say there is no good, there is no evil, I get suspicious. Now, if, like you said, you're trying to bring some harmony. Well, harmony occurs when there are different frequencies. Harmony does not occur when there's just one note. So you may have C, G, and you may have E. And everybody is vibrating on their different frequency, which now creates the spectrum or the harmony. Okay, so the perspective that you're coming from, and even the type of questions that you're asking, speak to more to someone who may think. And I'm not putting words in your mouth. I'm just sharing my perspective, my frequency. It sounds to me like you almost feel like you have a monopoly on Christianity or God. So when someone quotes the Bible, if the Bible's quoted, you immediately got to come in and say, well, no, this is what it is. And that there's so much that I could see problematic in that stance and in that perspective. Your original question was, there's no good and evil as stated by me. So where do these valuations come from? And then we said, well, it's what works for the individual, but good and evil is a construct of your morality. Your morality is given to you by your norms and your customs, usually as handed to you by your religion. Now, of course, we have cosmic morality. In our traditions, we call that ma'at. And cosmic morality differs from your religious morality and your religious piousness, which now speaks to good and evil. What we understand that there are polarities. There are positive polarities and there are negative polarities. And as Yusef said, they are all encompassed in the creation of God. that positivity and that negativity, and then at the center there's just the isness. There's the it is because it is. So some of the questions you're asking, I understand the context and I understand the intent of them, but this is where we get into the realm of dead information, and it's not like I'm trying to dodge all of your questions, but for me, they're just pointless. We're speaking about food that you ingest in order to build strong communities again, and if we think that we're going to need to all come on the same exact page with every notion to build a community, then it's never going to happen, and we don't need that. We just need to arrive at some universal truths. One of the things that you said was you're trying to bring a sense of harmony. Well, so are we. We're trying to bring a sense of harmony, and maybe we have different ways to go about bringing apart that harmony, and all that would mean is this, Gerald, that you were probably a part of a different community initiative than we are. That's all. So that's how I'm going to answer that. I don't want to get into a back and forth about something that I don't really even care that much about.
Okay. All right. We're going to move on to the next call. That was an excellent response to that. I'm going to bring in the perfect black out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, spirituality, communicating with ancestors, as his question. Go ahead, brother, out of PA.
Hey, what's going on?
Peace.
Hey, what's happening, man?
Well, I wanted to talk to you about the vibration and spirituality, connecting like with your ancestors. But if it's okay, I'd like to say something about the previous call, if I can.
Okay, go ahead. Make it brief.
What? I'm gonna make it very, very brief, and that's probably one of the reasons. I'm gonna make it very brief. That's why one of the reasons why this is probably like my first time on a Sunday call, because when you talk about this religious dogma, I think that's really holding us back as a people and as a group. I really do. People who call themselves Christians, they don't know Christianity started with Alexander the Great and Ptolemy. They don't know that Jesus was Serapis first. So was Zeus. So was Muhammad. All these dudes, they're Serapis.
Look, yeah, and we know that. I'm going to tell you why I talk about religion.
But they don't know that. But they don't know that.
I believe one of the biggest separating factors in our community is religion. I mean, when you look at other, I'm like, they didn't dissected us up. I mean, we in Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventists, Catholic. I mean, we're involved in religions, and when you look at the history of the religion, you'd really even have to question why melanated individuals would even be a part of that religion when you look at the history of it. And, it's a thing I'm trying to bring some cohesiveness and some universality to everything. It's like, look, if we get on there, because one thing you never see all these religious leaders come to one table and try to come together and discuss the similarities between their different schools of thought. They always want to just concentrate on the differences and what separates. So that's just the reason I do it on Sunday, is because I really feel like that is a separating factor. The school of thought I came out of, our master teacher, he took a lot of time in trying to explain these different religions to us, to make us get an understanding of what these belief systems are, so he could bring us out of them. That was the intention. To say, look, you got to come out of this stuff, because it's like a spell. We call it the spell, the ghost spell, the ghost spell. The people are under a spell and they're dead.
Well, my thing is this, Yusef, is that we as a people, we need to understand that the Urbas, Sharifas, I'm pronouncing it right, and the Almond priesthood, all these bastardized versions of what you're getting out of the Catholic Church, and you're also getting out of the English Church. Because the books that most black people are going by, it's coming out of the Catholic Church or the English Church, the Anglican Church. That is where it's coming from. But we don't want to identify that all these books, they come up out of Africa. All of them. We don't want to deal with the original version. The original version we look at it as being pagan, and the copy version we think is divine.
And that is my point, and that is the point I try to express to Gerald a lot of times. But I don't understand. I may not be very good at expressing it. That this is the original. Where I'm trying to come from the original, and you're trying to come from a copy. And I don't know how to convey that. I guess maybe I'm not conveying it clear enough. We were taught that if you're misunderstood, it's your fault.
Well, here's what you got to understand. The renowned authorities that I think, as far as on these copied versions, I think is Jordan Maxwell and Dr. Walter Williams. And they break it all down. Like most of these books, the Old Testament and New Testament, they only go back like 1,000 years. That's it. Old Testament 1,000, Old Testament 1,000, New Testament, 700. They always point at the Dead Sea Scrolls. They weren't Jews. They didn't practice. They practiced multiple gods on different days. It's not the same. We're following something up out of the Catholic Church, because all these religions, they all 501c corporations. They're all up under the Vatican.
Corporations. They are. But brother, I don't want to get too far off point. Let me get back to.
Okay.
Let me pull you back.
I'm gonna get back.
I know you want to go in. I know you want to go in on the last call, but we don't have to. We don't have to beat the dead horse.
That's fine. That's fine. What I wanted to speak to the guest about, and he was talking about certain vibrations and how people who have passed on, they're on certain vibrations. I want to basically deal on a spiritual level, so that's basically what I want to talk about. Is there any books or where should I go as far as like how to, vibrate with your ancestors? Like, say, what's the brother that like Phil Valentine? I really haven't read none of his stuff, but I'm definitely interested in on getting onto that spiritual level.
Okay, sure. Well, first thing to keep in mind, brother, is that part of the reasons why, let's just say, I don't know how long that heated debate lasted, but let's say if it was 15 minutes, that debate just lasted because of disagreements over a book. And I know we look at images of Farad Muhammad sitting reading the book, Nation of Islam, and we say, you know what, books are good. Books are what we need because that's our liberator. But oftentimes books can be a divisive tool, because we come to a place sometimes where, again, it's the interpretations, because we're not having experiential or integrative experiences. And an integrative experience or integrative experience is one where you actually do it yourself. If you put these things to practice yourself, then you'll find less of a need and dependency on someone else's perspective as expressed through a book. So, part of sometimes our challenge and our difficulties in joining not only with each other, but joining with our guardian ancestors and spirits that are with us is because we're quick to go get a book on it, and someone tells us how they experience communicating with their Egun or their ancestors, and we assume that that's how we have to go about it. So I will say to you, the first thing before, and I'm not saying don't grab any books, but I'm saying before you grab a book, because men, we're different. When we get a new piece of equipment, electronic equipment, typically what we do is we try to work it first. And we'll try to get it to do everything we want it to do. And then when we're done with that, then we go back and read the instructions. But we understand that there has to be integrative work first or applicable work first. So the first thing when you're communicating with your higher Egun or your higher ancestors, the first thing you want to look at is the things that they did. If you look at in African tradition, a lot of the songs and the dances are based around common activities that ancestors performed. So you have dances that are for the harvest. You have dances that are for the hunter. You have dances that are just for about every movement that your ancestors would have performed. So let's say if you go back into your known history, or it might be even in your meditative reflection, and you find out that you had maybe a uncle or your grandfather, something, they played the guitar. You can actually literally play the guitar. Now obviously put yourself in a space where you're breathing properly, and you're kind of in a meditative space. But when you reproduce or reenact the movements of your ancestors, what you're actually doing is giving them a portal to express themselves through. So traditionally we might have danced. If we wanted to invoke a certain hunter that was an ancestor. We might have danced like a hunter dances. When you did certain movements, maybe the movement looked like I was pulling back a bow and arrow as I was dancing. And this would give them an opportunity and a portal and a pathway to come through and communicate. Now, the first thing, though, as you're calling, if you just want to do a simple, and I'm giving you some real basics, because if you just do the basics, you're going to have success. And then you can build up from there, and that's where the books can come in to help you to recreate what you did. But on a real basic level, if you just call and say, I call forth the ancestors, my ascended ancestors that are pushing towards my healing and evolution. Okay, and I use those words for a reason. The ones that are pushing or working towards my healing and evolution. Those are your ascended ancestors, because you got the dead energy in there too. Those are the ones you want to avoid. And you call them forth. Now use the elements. Real simple way. That gives them a vehicle to travel. Anything that's in the spiritual world needs a vehicle of travel because they don't have the energy like we have. They don't have the ability to regenerate their ashe or their chi like we can regenerate. So that's why we leave them candles. That's why we light incense. That's why we put water. So a simple thing you want to do is have a representation of the 5 elements when you're trying to communicate, because that gives them strength and vehicles to travel through. You could have a feather or a piece of incense that's lit, and that will that represents earth, fire, and air. But the incense can be air. You can have a candle for fire. You can have a bowl of water, or maybe even a crystal for earth, and you can have a piece of metal nearby you. And you let them know that I leave these elements out here so you will have the energy of these elements to travel to me and communicate. And then you just sit and listen. And that's a real basic exercise that you could do tonight. And then from there, if you want, you can look more into the sciences of astral travel. There's an author by the name of Robert Bruce that has a pretty good book on that, on astral travel. And that will help you to go through the astral realms and start practicing with communicating with the ancestral kingdom. But my first advice is to skip the book and understand that ancestors are in your blood. They don't go anywhere. So when you're communicating with an ancestor, you're just invoking something that's already in your DNA double helix. It's in your blood. It's not something that you're pulling out of the sky.
I just want to comment real quick. You said a couple of things. I question first. First, you mentioned the 5 elements. I got a question on that, but I did want to make a comment first. Mm-hmm. And this is about the previous caller. When he came on the call, he started talking about, I'm suspicious. And that right there is what kind of set me off a little bit, because it's like, what are you implying? That someone is on here trying to take somebody down some, you know what I'm saying? That's what kind of set me off. You're going to bring harmony to something. You don't start off a conversation by slighting someone. I don't like that. But my next, my question is, what is the 5th element?
Oh, metal. So we usually speak about the 4 elements of earth, fire, water, and what did I miss out? Earth, fire, water,
air,
wind. Yeah, air. I'm sorry about that.
Air, fire, water, and earth.
And then you have metal as well, which constitutes its own element. Okay.
Okay. Now, so metal would be under the earth element.
Metal would.
The 5th element was spirit.
Metal could be under the earth element, but metal is more of the masculine representation of the earth element. The earth element is feminine. So metal is that masculine element. And the brother asked what kind of metal. Iron is always good. That's
so the 5 elements are basically earth. I always use the band for earth, wind, fire, and water. And what else was there? You said, I know one is metal. So
yes, sir.
Okay. So and I have them all then.
That's 5 of the elements. That's not all the elements. That's 5 of the elements. But we're speaking about ancestral communication. Now, you don't always need all those elements. If you're, especially like you're just dealing with spirit, like on the astral plane, spirits on the astral planes, I find that all you really need for them is fire. Because they live in the dark. You just need light. So it depends on who and what you're communicating with. This is one of the reasons why around cemeteries they always put iron gates. Now, if you ask them about it, they'll act like, no, we just like to use iron gates. But there's a reason for it, because it contains ancestral energy. It keeps them locked in as far as what they say. Yeah, they think it does.
Well, that's one thing I want to move away from. Like I said, I've been probably like maybe 30 years. I moved away from religious dogma, and like I said, I think we as a people need to focus more on our true spirituality as opposed to some religious dogma. And the astral travel, and you said, because I heard some people have done it. I don't know if they're doing it incorrect, because I believe you probably need a teacher, and when they're doing this astral travel, they're bringing bad energy with them, and sometimes they see stuff like gremlins and various things of that nature. Because I do believe that whatever you manifest your own demons. I think they're your own demons, and I believe you create them all. And I think whenever you astral travel, whatever you do, you bring all that with you from something that you've seen on this realm. Because most of the stuff that I've learned so far, like the devil is really something new. Because before, they were just gods. They can do good and bad. It wasn't basically a specific devil, because it's really something new. Because when people start doing the history of these religions and where most of the stuff come from, they'll find out that the devil is really something new, because gods were just able to, they could bless you or they could curse you. But my thing right now, I just basically want to focus on, that astral travel. And you said the book was by Bruce somebody. Who was that book from?
Robert Bruce. Here's the thing, though. With astral travel, there has to be an intended goal. A lot of times people want to astral travel just because it feels cool to have an out-of-body experience, but the astral realms are actually laboratories. They're not just where you go to hang out. I mean, you can go there and hang out, but you're kind of wasting your time. It's very similar to how this three-dimensional life is. Your whole life, everything that we experience now in this moment is something that you're supposed to be decoding, because your soul is actually, this is a dream that your soul is having. So it's just like when you go to sleep and you wake up from a dream, and it's a profound dream, the first thing you do is you start trying to figure out what the heck it meant. But in our waking life, or the higher level of the dream, which is what we're experiencing now, a lot of times we don't decode what things mean. So when you go into the astral realms, which you do every night when you go to sleep, when you go to sleep and you go you go to rest, I should say, and you go into those astral realms, the first thing you should be doing is trying to learn something and decode what's being put in front of you. That's the most powerful thing that you could do as far as the astral travel. But again, it's something that you can enact on yourself. You don't have to, you can get an instructor if you want, or a guide, but if you're melanin dominant, you don't actually need a guide. Your melanin is actually, it's an astral guide within itself. When you read a lot of the books, like when you read Robert Bruce, it's going to tell you one of the first things that you want to do is find an astral mate to travel with you. So what that is that's a spirit that will take you through the astral realms, protect you, and make sure you don't get lost. It's similar to, if anybody has ever read Dante's Inferno, he traveled through the various levels of hell with Virgil, the poet. Virgil was his astral mate. So when you astral travel, a lot of books will tell you need to find an astral mate. But in truth, your melanin is an astral mate. This is where we get the understanding that melanin connects itself to the archetype, going back to the Kemetic studies, of Khonsu. And Khonsu was called the night traveler. In Yoruba, we call that energy Osu. So you have Khonsu and you have Osu. And Osu means the moon. And Khonsu was connected to the moon because it was said that he was the one that travels at night. Well, the nighttime in this instance represents those astral realms. So Khonsu, which of course we know was an earlier form of Heru, also was called Draconis, where we get the term dragon, and we also Dracula. Get the term, you got it, Dracula, the one who travels at night, okay, and who looks for blood. He uses blood as a vehicle of travel to manifest in the 3D or the third dimensional reality. So that is your melanin that they're speaking about. So if you're melanin dominant, you already have an astral mate. That's what will get you through the astral realms and back home safely. And also that's where all your demons and those gremlins that you speak about are hiding, in the darkness of your melanin. But those demons and gremlins, you're absolutely right. You created those. That's just the stuff that you got to deal with, that you've been repressing. And if you put your hand on something long enough and squeeze it and compress it, it's going to look deformed and ugly. That's just, the laws of physics.
Okay, well, let me know, are you going to leave, like, your contact information? Because I don't want to hog the phone, because this is a very deep subject matter. And Yusef, I want to give it up to you, too, because you speak about this a lot, about your conscious and subconscious. I got to give it up to you because you heavy brother. But like I said, I don't want to hog the phone. But if you can, I don't know if you're gonna leave your contact information or what, because maybe I can email you and get some more information from you, because I like.
Yeah, matter of fact, could you go ahead and give your information out, brother, right now, so all the listeners can contact you if they need to.
Okay, I can be reached at you can go to my personal site, HaruAssaan.com, which is HRUASSAAN.com. I also run a school by the name of Sadulu House, and the link to that school is SADULUHOUSE.com. And if you have any questions, send them to questions@ANUNATION.org. That's questions@anunation.org, and somebody on my team will get it over to me.
Also, we got about 90 seconds left on the stream. We're going to go a little bit over, just a little bit, probably not much, a little bit over. This is a good conversation. Got a lot of people online. If you want to call in, the number is 424-222-5250. Make sure you get on our mailing list. Email us at highfrequencyblogtalk@gmail.com. You can catch all of our, I'm going to be doing a free webinar tonight. No, not tonight. I'm sorry. Tomorrow night on negotiable instruments. It's free. Make sure y'all tune in. You're listening to High Frequency Radio. Thank you, PA. I appreciate it, Brother Perfect Black.
Thank you. All right.
Peace.
All right, peace. Hey, real quick, there's this document that I read, and it's called the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. And there was an interesting, because you brought up blood and things like that, and I was doing a lot of research on this blood sacrifice and this drinking of blood and calling forth spirits, and there was an interesting part in there. And I'm going to read it real quick. It's only about, it's not real long. It's like a paragraph. But it says, it's talking about these beings. This is Thoth giving us a warning about entities that exist in other dimensions and how they come into our dimension. And it says, far in the past, before Atlantis existed, men there were who delved into darkness, using dark magic, calling up beings from the great deep below us. Forth came they into this cycle. Formless were they of another vibration, existing unseen by the children of earthmen. Only through blood could they have formed being. Only through man could they live in the world. In ages past, they were conquered by the masters, driven below to the place whence they came. But some there were who remained, hidden in spaces and plains unknown to man. Lived they in Atlantis as shadows, but at times they appeared among men. When the blood was offered, forth came they to dwell among men. In the form of man moved they amongst us, but only to sight were they as are men. Serpent-headed when the glamour was lifted, but appearing to man as men among men. And it was real interesting. It goes on to say how they could change their form. They're serpent-like creatures, but they could shape-shift and take on the form of men. But they needed blood, actually, to come into this dimension. I think that would be beyond the scope of our conversation, but I wanted to. But people have heard me talk about this before on this show. But I wanted to throw that out there. This blood always seems to come up all the time in invoking spirit.
Yeah, and brother Yusef, it's not just blood, which is something that people need to be aware of. That passage was actually talking about the Tamahu. If anybody's familiar with that term, and the Tamahu is the created man. Okay, and this was a man, if you're dealing with the Quran, well, not so much the Quran, but the nation of gods and earths, you have the story of Yaqub, which Dr. York also spoke about. Right?
We have it too. Yeah, okay. Big-headed science.
The big-headed scientist, there you go. And what it speaks about is the creation of the grafted man, which is the soulless man. We spoke about that right in the early beginning.
Yes, we did.
Those without souls. So they are using, of course, plasma, spiral, energy in order to materialize on this plane. But you got to remember that if you're an individual that's melanin dominant, the key is blood is given because there's melanin in the blood. That's why you give blood. It's sacrifice. So that also means you don't have to give blood. You know, sometimes you'll give fruit. You know, sometimes you'll give things like dark fruits are highly melanated. You know, but it's the melanin that brings these entities to fruition. It gives them a vehicle of travel. But you also have what's called ectoplasm. And ectoplasma is the plasma that's on the outside of your body. It's on your skin. If you watch the movies Ghostbusters, they used to talk about.
I was just thinking about that.
Yeah, the ectoplasm. Yeah. But it's a real thing. It's something that they deal with a lot in courts of law, because ectoplasma comes out when a person is fearful. Okay, that plasma, that shield, okay? And if you go into a court of law, there are entities of people who are there who feed off of the ectoplasma of those who present themselves as defendants. Okay, and this is one of the reasons why, I know people have experienced this, if you go to court, even if you're not someone who's in the midst of the quote-unquote fight, but you're just sitting in the room, you feel completely drained when you leave. First thing you do when you go home, you feel like you got to wash, and you got to lay down. Because there are entities there that are pulling that ectoplasmic energy, okay? And that's how they stay alive. That's how they remain on the planet. And one of the things that we can also do to keep them alive is just to give them our attention. This is why once we start getting into deep conversations and we start going somewhere that's actually fruitful, somebody will come in and distract us and bring us to point us back to something that's dead, so that we can give our blood or our energy or just our attention as God people to that particular topic. I mean, we were talking about community building and ingesting the right spiritual, esoteric, and physical foods, and then we started talking about the Bible, which we've already determined a long time ago isn't really working for those of us who are interested in rearing real communities. It's a dead issue at this point. But if we give our attention to it like we did for so long, we now bring it back into reality. We make it real again. Okay? So, yeah, you're absolutely right. But, you know, people need to realize it's not just blood. So just because you think, well, I'm keeping my blood, I ain't letting nobody bite me, it doesn't mean that you're not still giving your plasma or your spiral or spirit energy to something and keeping it alive.
There are entities that feed off fear, is what you're saying.
Yeah, because fear is a real thing. Fear is a food.
Yeah, it's a food source to them.
Yep, you got that in Clash of the Titans. Clash of the Titans, Hades talked about that. I'll make man fear again. And that's how Hades got strong. So, you know, but it's just the attention. You know, that's why when we getting deep into these conversations, the next thing in the newspaper tomorrow, we're going to find out somebody killed one of our children again. You know, and then we give them our attention. And that's what keeps them sustained on the planet. That's what keeps them alive and real.
Wow. Hey, we got another question. Brother Jason, here's a comment. God and orientation. Coming out of Michigan. Are you in Michigan, brother?
Yeah, I'm in Michigan.
All right. What's going on? Peace to the God.
Peace. Yeah, this word God, like, and it's where it comes from, like, where does it come from? Because, and how is it that we use this word if it's not that old, or this title to describe God if it's not that old?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why? Like kind of how you saying you bring life to something that's not relevant, you know. Why would we do that? And why would we keep doing that?
Yeah, because we keep trying to resurrect dead people. You know, when I first started describing that God, one of the things I said early on in the conversation was that, well, you know, I don't really use this word God, but I'm using it for parathenical reasons because I'm talking to the general masses. And Brother Yusef said, yeah, I know. He was right there with me. As long as we have to continue speaking to the masses, at times we have to drop our vibration to speak their language. And the question that you're asking is a powerful question, and it may be even as a convicting question, what you're asking. Maybe what you're asking is deeper than what you're really saying, and you're saying we need to change directions and stop being so concerned about resurrecting the masses. Because as long as we use this terminology, we will always leave the doorways open for individuals who have an interpretation or who feel they have a monopoly on those terms, and we always will leave the door open for a whole lot of useless and pointless argument. So maybe if we use words and definitions that only speak to our freedom, then it would make more sense. I agree with you. And I say the same things go for maybe words like love or good and evil. Maybe we should learn their root, their origins, because often what you'll find, brother, is that the words that we're shunned away from are the most divine. The word shit is actually one of the original origins, the oldest origin that we have for the word God. Okay, and shit comes from the word soot. Soot and shut are the same thing as shit. And you'll find that soot is what's left after when something burns black, and that black substance that's left, which is a form of carbon or melanin, that was considered one of the oldest forms of God. But the word that we still have left over, we're told not to say because it's profane and offensive. And maybe it's not.
If I may also answer that question, because I've answered this question about the use of the term God, because I say peace to the gods when I open up my show. I come from a school of thought. We have a book called God, God, God. We actually God used as an acronym by the Masons for Gomar, Oz, and Dubar, which is wisdom, strength, and beauty. Mm-hmm. God spelled back, which is dog, which references Anubis in Egypt. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of different interpretations as to the meaning of God. It comes from the word gut, meaning good, from the German language, and the German language did not exist prior to 750 AD. I'm very, very knowledgeable about the word God, but I am a teacher. And just as he so eloquently stated, we have to come down sometimes. Now, how we were taught is that we have to give people what they want so they'll want what we have to give. So when I speak to people, when I'm speaking to a Christian, I'm going to use the word God, because I'm not here to try to let my ego get in the way of what I know. Well, you should be using the word Elohim. I will tell you about Elohim. I'll tell you about Anu. We can talk about the Sumerians and the Egyptians. We can get into all of those discussions. But at the end of the day, a large section of our people are in the confines of Christianity here in the West. And they use the word God. All right? So we are the minority. So if my job is to wake people up, I'm going to use the terms that they are most comfortable with. When I'm speaking to a Muslim, I'm going to use the word Allah. I'm going to use the terminology. I'm going to speak their language. And if you can't speak their language, then how are you going to bring them out of something? It depends on what you're. Now, if you're only concerned with yourself, okay, that's something else. But if you're concerned with uplifting your people, you have to be able to go to your people and speak their language. You have an example of this in the book of Acts, where they have where the Pentecost, the day of Pentecost, where they can start a whole religion behind this, and they say speaking in tongues. They got this speaking in tongues. It doesn't say that in the Bible. It says they were given the ability to speak with other tongues, and then it gives the different languages that they spoke, and they could go out and spread this what they call the gospel to all these different nations of people, but actually go in and speak their language. So I'm using that as an analogy and to illustrate the point is that when I go out and I speak to my people, I'm attempting to speak their language. So that's why I use the term.
Yeah, I understand. I understand, but that's right. What I was saying. Like earlier, he was saying that you kind of have to sacrifice yourself to come down to their level. But wouldn't that be, appeasing to the fact that they can't rise if they don't understand the level that you understand it at? Because if you got to bring them,
you got to gradually. Are you going to try to take somebody from kindergarten to a PhD in one swoop? Or are you going to try to take them from the kindergarten, the first grade, the second grade, the third grade, the fourth grade, the fifth grade, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th? College, then are you going to try to take them to degrees?
Well, I understand that, and I was just about to say that because when to me it's kind of like almost common sense. It's just, that's what it is. It's common sense. If I know something new comes out of the old, and maybe that's just it. They don't know the stuff that they find that's new comes from an old. Then, how would they know?
I'm going to say it like this. I'm going to say you got demons out there because some of this stuff is common sense. You're absolutely correct. And they don't want to see it then only either one or two things. They have some type of blockage or they have some type of alternative agenda. And that's just what the brother just alluded to a few minutes ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm also going to say this, too. Your name was Jason, right, Brother Jason?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh, okay. If you feel that if you have some information, if you got some light to share, and you feel that you need to share it in a way that for you is unperverted, unfiltered, not watered down, and you want to use that original terminology, then you should do that. Because there are different stages. And like Brother Yusef just said, you got kindergarten, first grade, second grade, all the way to 12th or whatever. But you don't have the same person teaching each grade level. So maybe you're being led in your spirit. If like you're listening and you're like, man, I don't want to use those terms. And I got the same thing. Certain terms you're not going to hear me use. Certain terms I will use. But that just speaks to the grade level that I'm going to teach. Like the Christian church and the mosque and these organized religions, like I said earlier, they're valuable because honestly, and this may offend people, but whatever. But at the kindergarten level, you need someone to acclimate you to studying and learning. And sometimes we come in and we're so savage, we need those base level training and lessons. And that's what organized religion does that. If you out here searching for drugs every 5 minutes, or you strung out or you run in the streets, you need something that's going to stand you up and clean you up first before you start getting the heavy information. But then you also need teachers who teach the masters. And when you're dealing and you're talking to masters, you can use that other terminology. Your spirit or your soul may be urging you to become what we would call a teacher for the masters, not a teacher for the masses. So I'm not saying you are, I'm not trying to impose that upon you, but I'm just saying if you're having that inkling, go with it, run with it, because we need those people too. Because Brother Yusef will tell you, and he don't even have to tell you. Obviously, everybody who's listening to this show right now, y'all can hear how agitated he was getting a minute ago, because it is frustrating. It is extremely agitating. I know exactly what he's feeling when you're trying to help people and you're putting right information out there, and the stubbornness, the stubbornness of people keeps coming in and tries to bring you back to dead points. Like they're dead set on not getting it and trying to co-opt whatever it is that you're presenting. Is frustrating, and especially as men, our typical response is not to sit here and debate or get emotional. Our typical response is to silence you. So this is a whole new world for men when we're trying to teach and we have that level of opposition and we can't remove you from the classroom. So there are different levels to this, and if you might have the temperament for this or you might not. But we need people who are teaching at the master level too. Just like we needed Khalid Muhammad. And when he was asked, hey man, can't you tone it down a little bit? He said, somebody has to be strong. Somebody has to hold the line. Because that was his symbol. When we go back again to character, that was his character in our community. And there are different characters. What Brother Yusef does, he got stuff that I don't have, and vice versa. And I'm not trying to go into his land and get what he got, because he's gotten that over decades probably. It would take too long. But I got my lane. I got a nice whip in my lane too. My car is all right. So it's like we racing down the highway and we all got our lane and pimping our rides out. So your lane might be the lane for masters, brother. And I'm saying it to you, but I'm saying it also to anybody listening. If you got the inkling to go that way, go that way, because dealing with the masses is exhausting, because for the most part, you're trying to raise the dead, like you say.
You are. And one last point. When I use the word God, I also use it in the sense of a discipline. When I'm referencing the people, because God means anything or anyone who's in control. Mm-hmm. So I'm talking to people who are striving to master themselves. Self-mastery. I'm using it in that sense. It's self-mastery. It's an internal process. You're here to master yourself. Know thyself.
So true.
Yeah, I understand that. Thanks, y'all two gentlemen. Make it clear. I understand that clearly. But I got one more question about the blood now. Now, do the spirit travel through? Let's just say the mother and the father, they create the a child, do that spirit travels through the blood that way too? Those same spirits, like, you know, when you speak of ancestors, because if the grandmother's spirit traveled through that, your mother's DNA, and then your mother's DNA pass on to you as a child, and I think you get what I'm saying.
Absolutely. No, you're right. That's exactly how it comes through. When we come into the world, not only do we come with astral mates, and those astral mates are the angels or the Orisha or those powers that we come in with, but we also come into the world with an ancestral line which is already encoded in the syntax of our DNA. They call that the 98 or the 97% of the DNA, they call the junk DNA. That's where all your ancestors are sitting at. And those strands that are not activated, okay, or at least you think they're not activated. But yeah, they do come through. They come through in the blood. That's why invoking your ancestors shouldn't be this big scary process, because in truth, if you're sitting here and you're alive and you got blood, you're already carrying them anyway. The problem is they become demons to you. Demon just means hidden substance or hidden genius. They become demons to you when you don't interact with them in a way, when they're trying to give you wisdom and you keep suppressing it and annoying it. Now they become that voice in your head you can't get rid of. But you're absolutely right, brother. They come through during that birth canal, you know, spirits. And keep in mind that they're spirits. They're not souls. They're not the souls of your ancestors. They're the spirits of your ancestors.
All right, brother. Appreciate it, brother. Jason?
Yeah.
Appreciate you. Okay, y'all. I think I got time for one more call. I'm going to get Brother Assaan-ANU coming out of Dallas, Texas. He has a comment on weight loss and spirituality. Hello, brother.
Yes,
welcome to the show.
Alafia, brothers. How are y'all this morning?
Alafia.
Great.
It's been wonderful listening to y'all. But no, I have a comment. I went on a 91-day detox, and it was a total liquid diet. I went through a nutritionist who's from Kenya, and it was a spiritual experience. And I was told to do this from my Orisha, from Obatala, because I'm a healer, and for me to heal, I must first heal myself. I lost 43 pounds, but the idea wasn't about losing weight. The idea was about getting healthy and staying healthy and ridding myself of the toxins that had plagued my body for the past 53 years. And since then, I've picked up a little weight, but I don't have diabetes anymore. I don't have high blood pressure anymore. Everything I eat is organic. The only thing that I drink is reverse osmosis water. I'm strictly, the only time that I eat meat, if I do eat meat, it's a organic meat, and I can only eat meat once every 7 days, but I very, very seldom eat meat at all. But I just wanted to say that what I experienced and what I continue to experience and continue to evoke my ancestors, it is just wonderful. And I just wanted to say that, that it's very important to remember our ancestors and to remember our past before we can go forward, and to know who we are, and to know ourselves.
Give thanks.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate the comments, and thank you for listening. You've been listening for a minute?
I've been
this is your first time calling in, ain't it?
Yeah, I've been listening to your show. Actually, I just started in, July. And I just requested you as a friend, and you on Facebook, and so I was looking at your Facebook page, and you accepted my friendship request, and I saw the Sunday spirituality, and I decided, to listen this morning, and I'm glad I did.
All right, appreciate it, brother. Thank you. Well, okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, brother, it's been a ride this morning.
For sure. I feel like I've traveled.
One more time. Give out the contact information one more time.
Okay. Again, for anyone who has any questions, You can send an email to the word questions@anunation.org, which is ANUNATION.org. For those of you who, mainly work by phone, you can also give me a call at 1-800-ANU-LIVING. So that's 1-800-ANU-LIVING. If you need to send a call in. And, of course, my school site is seduluhouse.com. And I also do a blog talk show as well. You can find the links to that on the website enlightenmentandtransformation.com. And the show is, of course, blogtalk.com, blogtalkradio/enlightenment and transformation.
All right.
And also, just a quick note, I'm on a tour as well right now. I'll be in California, actually, in your home. I'll be at SO1 Books and, doing a book signing. I think it's on the 7th of this month. And then after that,
great.
Yeah, I'll be heading to Dallas and a couple other spots. But, you can go on the sites, Enlightenment Transformation, and see the event list and see where I'll be on the tour.
All right.
Cool.
Great. Thank you, brother.
Thank you
for coming and sitting in with us this morning. Every time you have been on this show, it has been. Y'all need to go back in my archives and listen to the other shows we've done. This is our third show that we've done with this brother, and you are truly on the master level, brother. I appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your information, your wisdom, your insight with us this morning. We got to have you back again sometime in the near future again, all right?
It's always open to you. It's all good.
All right, thanks. I want to thank all my listening audience for tuning in this Sunday morning for Sunday Talk Quest for the Spirit. I will be back in the morning. Going to get back on that legal thing. Peace to all the guys and guys.